Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Thanks for joining me for my Chibi Akuma's live stream. We're going to be playing some games today. This is basically a hardware test because last time I tried to do some live streaming, I had some technical problems. So fingers crossed things are going to go a bit better today, but if they don't, I thoroughly apologise. I'm still working on my hardware setup here. It's quite a complex setup. I'll be discussing it today. I'll also be playing some games. Playing them badly because boy do I suck at this game all of a sudden. I used to be good at it but not anymore. But what we're also going to be doing is, of course, we're going to be discussing programming. In these streams I play the games. I also talk about anything anyone wants to talk about in the chat. I try and make focus on responding to the chat, so if you've got questions please fire them away. But also I discuss the technicalities of the game to the limit of it. I know them. Sometimes you can see things about the design of the game, how they're working around the limitations of the hardware, so we'll be doing some of that as well. Anyway, let's switch over to our video display and we'll actually see the game in action. So we're going to be starting with Chippendale Rescue Rangers today. This is a game that I didn't own as a child, but a friend of mine did. So once upon a time, would you believe I was actually good at it? But that seems to be a long time ago. Now, the hardware I'm using today is an analog capture hardware, and that does cause some small latency, but I'll be honest, I can't blame that for the poor skills that you're going to see because I tried playing it on an emulator and it wasn't much better. Anyway, let's start things off and we'll start playing. So first of all, let's turn on our cameras. Let's turn on the hardware camera over here. There it is. So this is my Famicom here. This is a live camera here. So this is the one I'm going to be using today. It's got a analog mod here. So that's what we'll be playing with. And also, as a special bonus today, we have, there's my buttons here. Hello there. Oh, good start. Wearing two pairs of headphones here, pulling them out. So this is hopefully everything I'm going to be using. I'm having to test it all today because boy have I been having technical problems with all of the hardware plugged in. So we've now got an old iToy we're using as our main webcam. It looks pixelated, but that's intentional. I'm doing it as a sort of retro effect. We've got a fake GoPro, which is a 8-man camera here, which is my overhead camera. Hello there. We've got an IO data video capture card, analog capture from a real machine. And we've got a lighting setup. So we've got a red light here, front light. We've got the side light in green. We've got a halo light, I think that's called, in yellow, and we've got a backlight in blue. So we've got nice surround of colours here, hopefully a bit more interesting. And we're going to be playing some games, that's why we're here. Now, let's get it started then. I've probably already been copyright struck for the audio in the background there, but that's why we're on a different channel. So, as you may know, the Famicom cables are very short here. So, let's discuss the elephant in the room then, the technical problems. Now, if you caught my last stream, which I've now deleted because it was so bad, my internet kept dropping. Now my internet's connected both through a gigabit Ethernet USB cable, which is brand new, but it seemed to work fine before when I used it, but last time it was dropping out all the time. Now, why was it dropping out all the time? Well, it seems there was a USB problem, and I think I've identified the real source of that problem now, but I will sort of go through the stages of it. So basically, during the stream, the network kept dropping out. I'd noticed previously in the week that I couldn't get the video card working, the analog capture that you're seeing playing the game now. And at the time I thought, well, it was brand new, so I thought, oh, maybe it's just like the drivers are a bit dodgy or something. But anyway, that day, the video capture worked fine. Network card was all over the place, completely all over the place. Later on, after I basically gave up on the stream, I did a test stream with the machine reset, and then the network was fine, the video capture was fine, but the overhead camera, this sort of one here, that was blinking very slightly on and off like it was having some kind of problem. So after the stream ended, I went through the sort of debugging procedure, tried various, I've got a variety of hardware over here, I've got even more now because of problems, but I tried a variety of hubs, powered hubs, non-powered hubs, USB 2 hubs, USB 3 hubs. I tried chaining them so that the network card was on USB 3 and all the video devices were on USB 2, trying to basically limit the amount of bandwidth the video devices could use in case it was like a problem there, and and it didn't work. So I went to the shops, bought more hubs, all powered hubs, that is, another USB 3 powered hub, a USB 2 powered hub, didn't make any difference. But I was starting to notice that the killer was the analog capture device. If the analog capture device wasn't plugged in, everything else worked fine. But if the analog capture device was plugged in, something else failed. Sometimes it was the analog capture device, sometimes it was something else. Now, so I bought my analog capture devices, bought another two, and they both did the exact same thing. So, okay, that's quite interesting, isn't it? And then I realised that if I unplugged the overhead webcam, which is now an iToy, it wasn't an iToy before, this is an iToy, the i3 it's called, isn't it? It's the PlayStation 3 iCamera. If I unplugged that, my other webcam, and used this, it all worked fine. And I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get suspicious here because that camera's been fine so far. And then today, it was all working absolutely fine until I turned on the Famicom and then half my USB went blip. This is an analog distortion problem, isn't it? I'm getting signal interference from all of the devices I got plugged in. So all of these USB cables are massive, acting like huge antennas and picking up the analog distortion from my 1980s game console, which doesn't exactly meet modern emission standards. So why it doesn't affect the Wi-Fi first, I'd love to know, because throughout all my wired network problems, my mobile phone, which I'm listening to here just to check the stream's not gone down, was working fine. So wired internet 1, USB 3.0 I think was the case. But anyway, not seen that before, so maybe that's of some interest to any of you out there. You know, I certainly didn't expect that as a problem. I'm rather glad it's... My main concern, honestly, was it was the USB hub in the laptop. Like maybe the laptop controller was not quite to spec, and it was just going to like erratically fail, and there'd be nothing to do about it except for buy another laptop. But fortunately, if it's just the analog, you know, maybe I can work around that one way or another. So what I've done now is I've put the power adapters, before they were behind the laptop, I've put the power adapters on the other side of the room, and they're now plugged into the same mains adapter as some of the lights are. Maybe the lights causing interference next, no doubt. Oh, go away. I'm nearly at the second stage, so I apologise for how bad I am at this game. I used to be good at it, but don't get a lot of time for game playing anymore. Why not? Well, I've been working on more tutorials, of course. So I'm working on a big MSX tutorial at the moment. It's going to cover every bitmap graphics function. The MSX 9938 can do drawing of lines and filling of areas and things automatically in hardware. And I'm going to be covering in my tutorial all of those one by one with working example code. So that's... you know, a lot of these I've never even used, so that should be quite interesting to people. I'm also covering all of the graphics modes, the bitmap graphics modes that I've not covered before, the high-res mode, the 256 color mode, and also there's some special modes in the MSX2 Plus which allow for up to 12,000 or 19,000 colors. It's basically it's called YJK. It uses a black and white component 5-bit and a two color encoded components that are 6 bits each but are shared between 4 pixels. So it's quite a complex mode, but I say it's quite cute to see it in action. Not sure how useful it is for anything except for showing off graphics, but you know, as I say, it's quite fun to play with, and I've added the support for that into AccuSprite Editor as well. And I'm generally working on AccuSprite Editor. You should do a tutorial for nearly all platforms in C. Maybe one day, Jimmy. I mean, I would need to assess how many people are already doing that kind of thing, because there's no point doing what everyone else is already doing. The benefit to assembly is most people are scared of it or just think it's not worth bothering with anymore. So there's a niche you can cover. I thought this boss might actually be faulty, because you would expect there to be some animation in here. It's obviously just a massive tile map, and the little bullets are sprites, and then I'm a sprite, and the thing I'm throwing is a sprite, but everything else is just static tiles. You'd have thought the hands would wiggle or something, but as I say, I played this on real hardware and on emulator. It's real hardware now, of course, but I thought I'd nearly killed him there. No, there's no animation. So yeah, the C tutorials, I mean, basically there's a lot more I can do in assembly first, because there's loads of other assembly languages that people are interested in covering. I mean, SH2, the what's it called? The 32X language. That's I've had people ask me about that. One of my patrons was interested in that, and the 32X and the Saturn, it also uses the same one. And the Saturn I kind of consider to be kind of the last 2D classic console, because it was kind of 3D, but the 3D was pretty terrible, but the 2D was really good. And the PlayStation 2, because Sony were quite sensibly blocking people releasing 2D games on it because they didn't want it to be seen as a 2D system. So there were very few games that were 2D on the PlayStation because Sony were actually against it, which, as I say, made sense. So the Saturn didn't have that, so it's got some really nice 2D games, and I'd be interested to have a little look at it. But as I say, one day, if I keep doing these kind of tutorials, one day I'm just going to run out of stuff. There'll be nothing left that I can cover feasibly. It's getting difficult now, not because there's not stuff I've not covered, but just because I'm not some genius programmer. I'm just some average guy just doing my best at all this. So, learning how to draw simple sprites from the SNES maybe took 3 hours or 5 hours or something. Documenting it another couple of hours, creating the tutorial and everything, it was doable in a small amount of time, relatively speaking. But if everything I have the skill to cover, I've covered, then all that's left is much more complex ones that could take so long to research that maybe I'd be down to one video a month. At which point, the YouTube algorithm's going to penalise me to the point that I'll get no hits whatever I do. So, as I say, I could imagine there being a point where I've covered everything that I can justify spending any more time doing, and maybe then it'll be the time to cover something else. I mean, I've done C, I've programmed in C, but I prefer assembly. Assembly is so much more down to the bare metal. With C, you're programming other things usually. You're programming people's libraries most of the case. Now, I mean, you could go down to the hardware, I guess, but it's very rare for people to do that in C. So, yeah, I mean, to say it'd probably be fun to do some in like MS-DOS or something at some point. Maybe just a very basic beginner's C tutorial. But as I say, there's so much more I can do in assembly at this time. So just bear with me a moment. Sorry, my chat's not showing on my phone for some reason. I thought I'd set it to. So yeah, but I mean, it's difficult to judge at the moment because you never know what's going to happen with a channel like this. It's I mean, at the moment I'm getting good views. I'm quite happy with the number of views. I'm getting like 400 views every 24 hours, which it's nothing special. It's not. It's like $1 a month in YouTube rewards. You're not going to live on it, but it's more than enough to justify putting the work in that I'm doing. So I'm perfectly happy with that. But the way that YouTube works, the algorithm and the rules, they could just say, okay, well, we're not going to promote anyone who's not one of the top 1% of publishers, or we're even going to remove them from the platform, because you never know what they're going to do. Like recently there were some changes to the law with regards to, they were told the way they were dealing with children's videos and children viewing the network was inappropriate. If they're being fined from 40 million or something, they'll do whatever they need to. And if that includes deleting people like me who are not financially viable, I'm sure, for the network, I'm sure I'm costing more in hosting the video files than I am earning them in viewing numbers, so in advertising. So as I say, you just can't make long-term predictions. So I would certainly continue teaching some kind of programming indefinitely, so long as my channel still maintains the same kind of viewership as it is today. But as I say, if that could no longer be assembly just because I no longer had anything left to teach or any new way to teach it, then that's what I'd do. But I mean, I think ideally, let's sort of imagine that my channel had 10,000 subscribers or 50,000 subscribers or something, a significant step up from what it has today in a couple of years' time. Well, at that point, hopefully my skill level would be better. I mean, I've got better lighting now and I'm more confident to appear on camera and things. So hopefully the standard of the tutorials I could do could be better than they were, and I could justify a larger time investment in them. So my initial thought would be, rather than moving to another language, to actually remake the basic tutorials for the Z80 assembly and things, but in a different way. Hopefully, you know, a better way. I don't know what it would be. I mean, you know, maybe that would be using whiteboards and using more sort of visual ways of doing things, as I say, like appearing on camera, for example. Or maybe it would be doing different styles of teaching, so that there were multiple versions depending on what method people wanted to learn. Like this, that's what the kind of super simple series is, where these are just single files that they just do one task. So that's one way I can continue the current series, just do the same kind of thing in different ways. And one thing I'd like to do at some point is a single lesson for each programming language, or even maybe one lesson that teaches all the major programming languages. So it would kind of be an hour long, and it would just cover, it would be like Z80 in 60 minutes kind of thing, or even Z80, 6502 and 68000 in 60 minutes, just condensing all of the knowledge down as much as possible while still making it as clear as possible for people who want either just need to start using it as quickly as possible, or as a taster for people who are, well, they don't really want to learn it, but they just want to feel like they have some knowledge, and, you know, watching the current 7 or 8 episodes is probably too much for them. So that's something I've thought of doing, but to do it properly, you would actually need to basically script the entire episode, and you would need to heavily edit it and recut bits if it was not efficient or not sufficiently explained. And I just can't spend the time on that, you know. As I say, I'm firefighting, learning enough just to keep making the current style of and current quantity of lessons. So I was working this morning on the Game Boy, moving back to the Game Boy for a change. The Game Boy, I've done Game Boy before, of course, but there were a couple of things that I hadn't covered, and there's a few things on most systems now that I still need to cover, and as I say, MSX extra graphics modes was certainly one. So on the Game Boy, the tutorial I've been working on this morning, still not finished, is using, I thought the bosses were better than this, I have to say. I mean, look at this thing, it's just a tiny little sprite with a few tiny little sprites falling off it. It's not, I've got Mega Man 2 as one of the later ones, and Mega Man 2 was really quite creative in the way they used the hardware, but this is pretty uninspiring for the old NES. NES could do better than this. Well, anyway, my actions of trying to reduce the problems today seem to have had some effect. Hopefully you're enjoying the stream. You know, it's a good thing when the hardware goes right, because I mean, it's quite stressful doing these streams in a way. You know, you have to try and keep thinking of things to talk about, and you know, anytime you do anything wrong, everyone's watching you and laughing at you probably. So I say it's quite stressful just talking and just, you know, trying to play the game your best you can, and having the hardware fall flat on its ass while you're trying to do all of that is a bit of a bottomer. You know, it's a bit of a rotter. So you know, if the hardware stays up, maybe I can cope with the gameplay and cope with the chat and things. But these buggers. So that's me dead there. I've got to continue. Let's try again. I went the other direction when I was playing yesterday. I was trying to work out which one was the harder one. Maybe both of them are the harder one. How do I jump down? There you go. So yeah, anyway, this Game Boy tutorial, so it's going to cover scrolling the tile map, which I had already. I've made an alternate one now. I got a tutorial that scrolled the tile map on all of the systems. I was going to do a multi-platform one, but it's too little to cover for the Game Boy, and I had a few other things that I wanted to go over on the Game Boy. So we're going to do a combined lesson that's going to cover the what's it called, the window. Now the window on the Game Boy is basically designed for sort of high scores and things. I don't think the NES has anything equivalent. Yeah, fucker. Okay, so basically it's designed to hold high scores and things, and it's just a basic overlay which uses a separate tile map. So I wanted to show how that fucker. I wanted to show how that worked, and so I couldn't get it working last time, but I have now. It seems strange. The limits on it seem really strange, so I kept thinking maybe I'm misreading it, but I couldn't figure out anything I was missing. But yeah, so the Windows one that I'm covering, and then the other one is well, it's a couple of things actually, really. It's how to use interrupts and how to switch the tile map. Now, I thought this was impossible because based on my play of other people's games, I didn't see anyone ever do this, but okay, I apologise for that. I clearly have some more work to do getting this setup working. The network just dropped again, so same problem as before. Network disappears, doesn't come back on. I had to disconnect the USB and reconnect it, and then it's all working again. So I'm hoping you can hear me now. OBS is reporting to be connected, but my own preview isn't working. Sorry, just bear with me a moment. I'm just okay. So I just have to update my phone there to just see what was going on. So okay, I think we're live again now. Okay, so where were we? I haven't got enough crates to get this guy. Oh, okay. Okay. I don't remember this game being this difficult, you know. I thought it was easier at the start. There's just no way to get past them unless you sort of drop down or unless you get enough crates for them. Maybe this is one of these ones to tell me I need a second player or something. Okay. Can you hear the music to the game? Just turn the music up a little bit. I'm wearing two different sets of headphones, so I'm hearing the game music full volume in my left ear, and then I'm hearing the stream in the right one. Shouldn't have picked that up, should I? That was useless. Okay. So when I die this time, I'm just going to give up because I'm obviously massively sucking at this game, so there's no point keeping playing it. So, the network problems seem to be better, but it's still not right, is it? So, what am I going to do about that then? This machine's only got two USB ports, 3 if you count the USB-C. So, just do it again. So, I got nowhere else to connect it. So let's try a different game. I mean, the 3 ports in total, I'm using one of them as a. So what I'm going to play now is Geki Kamen Ninja Den, which is what Ninja Turtles is known as in Japan. So that's what we're going to play now. We'll have a go at this. This is the classic one, the angry video game nerd made fun of. Yeah, we're not going to play that like that, are we? Dear try it again. Dear God. Okay, well you can play it, you can watch that utter mess for a moment, and I'm going to get some cleaning fluid. So I've got some isopropyl alcohol in a Hello Kitty Ninja sake cup here, and we'll give that a go. Now, just before we do, let's actually talk about what's probably going on here. So, I mean, you can see the graphics are all corrupted here. Now, on these cartridges on the old NES, there was virtually no RAM, no video RAM. In my tutorials, I load, let me get this right, sorry, I load tiles from the ROM cartridge into video RAM, but I've actually set the header up so that the cartridge has extra upgraded video memory within the cartridge, and that's just so I can use the memory in the same way as in my other tutorials on other systems. But the original NES wasn't like that. It had basically only 2K video memory, and it was just the tile map basically, so everything was in ROM. Now what's probably happened there is some of the pins are probably blocked, so it's reading the wrong parts of the ROM when it tries to access that video memory in the cartridge, that video ROM in the cartridge, and that's why the game code is working fine, because the game pins are okay, but the video code is not working at all because it's getting the wrong ROM file. Same's true in the Neo Geo. I can see some dirt and gunk on this, so can't tell what colour it is because of all the lighting there. So hopefully it's not blue gunk, you know. Hopefully it's not corrosion. It's just a bit of build-up of dust and things maybe. But my Neo Geo was doing the same. I bought Blazing Star for the MVS, and it was making crazy noises, and it was brand new, so I hadn't a clue what it was supposed to work like. And I thought, well, maybe it was like $300 cartridge, and I was thinking, I hope the cartridge isn't faulty, you know, for paying all that money. But I'm also using an MVS converter for my AES home console, so I thought, well, maybe it's the converter doesn't work right. You know, maybe it just doesn't quite support this game. And anyway, I gave it many cleans, and eventually it did work. And I think it was just some of the pins of the audio chips were blocked, and it was causing the audio data to read complete garbage, and it was making horrendous distorted noises. There we go. So put that sake cup there. I'm glad to see when I turn the NES on, the cameras don't all. Maybe they do. You see me okay still? My video window is showing a spinning wheel, but I'm showing it's still connected. Just let me check my video progress window here. I mean, it says I'm live. It says everything's okay. I think my phone's just playing up then. Okay, well anyway, let's carry on. I think we're okay. So you can see here with the Japanese version, you know, because I'm in Japan, which is why it's called Gekikamin Ninja Den. It would be called a Gekikamin Hero Den, I guess, in the UK. Regionalisation joke for you. They realised how stupid they were being giving it such an absurd title. When the sequel was called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but this Gekikamin Ninja Den thing was just what they called it. For the first version, I guess maybe the Turtles became more well known in Japan, or maybe they released the comic book after the first one came out or something, or maybe they just couldn't be bothered to re-internationalize it. Now go away. So it's interesting. I mean, this game came out on almost every system really. It was very popular. But it's quite different on all of them, partially because of the limitations of the hardware, to be honest. I can't remember how this one works, but I did play this one. I say my friend had this one, but I played the CPC version far more. I have once upon a time played this quite a lot, but not for a very, very long time. So the CPC version had sprite limitations like Bebop and Rocksteady. They were the same sprite, it couldn't handle the two sprites. And you do see a lot of that kind of thing in these old games. Like the fact the bottom of the screen is flickering like crazy. Like, I mean, this is again, I don't think maybe I'll have to double read the documentation, but I don't think the NES has any kind of window, because that bottom non-scrolling part on the Game Boy, that would be what you'd use the window for, you see. But with the NES, it's probably having to actually mess with the tile map during the screen redraw to achieve that, which is why it's flickering like crazy. Now the other interesting thing is, on this version, each of the turtles has different skills, which is why I now can't. Now I've got no range on this weapon, but on this Amstrad version, I don't think the turtles had any difference. I don't think so. And this battle was completely different. You could scroll around the screen all over the level really to attack this guy. So, as I say, they kind of took the same inspiration for the level, but actually the content of the level was heavily changed based on the limitations of the hardware, which I guess it's that was what it was like back then. You know, you had to do those kind of things. So I think there's a pizza in there, but I'll probably be dead by the time I get to the thing. Is this the version where you can go back in and get the pizzas again? Some of them you could do that. I mean, that's something it's worth mentioning. Okay, I can actually switch mid-level. I'd forgotten that. So what we can do is we can use Donatello's bow here to get these guys up here. Get the items, and then get to the item, and then switch to the injured turtle to re-health him up. Yeah, it's one thing I want to talk about. You often see in these games respawning enemies, and the enemy will, you'll go off screen and come back, and a turtle character, like in Mario, so that kind of turtle, an enemy will have reappeared as if you'd never killed it, and you think, oh, it's annoying. Why have they done that? And it comes back down to what I said before about the memory limitation, like it's just done it there. The memory limitations of the actual NES. It's got no memory at all, virtually none. I mean, I couldn't even make a buffer of the main memory for the tile map in my Grime Z80, which was a tiny, simple little game, because there was just no memory left. So it's the reason all the enemies are coming back again is just because they can't remember you've killed them. They've got not enough RAM to do that. So, I understand why people get frustrated by that, but just bear in mind that it's not poor programming as such. It's just they've got so little to work with. You know, these. Can I leave the level automatically? No, I can't. I suppose that's fair enough. So yeah, I say that's one of these places where if you don't understand the awful limitations these guys were under at the time, you wouldn't realise that they weren't doing it because they weren't doing it from malice. They were doing it just because they had no other choices, really. But anyway, so that's just it's something you say. I understand why people find them, these things frustrating, but it's just that they were really under the tough limitation. I've lost all the health now. So yeah, the pizzas did come back. And I've lost a turtle, so I might as well not bother going in there. I thought that was going to happen. Anyway, give up on that. I can remember where to go, I just can't remember how to play properly. Here we go here. Oh, there's a pizza here anyway. I don't know if you can see me. The reason I'm not talking is my keyboard is now going crazy. I'm having major signal problems here. It's like basically all my windows keep minimizing and maximizing themselves. What I tried to do was plug my video cable, my network cable into a different socket on a different hub, and it's now made the keyboard play up instead. Okay, so let's disconnect again. I'm going to connect via the Wi-Fi instead. This isn't going to work. Can you hear me now? Right, well, what happened there then? Well, essentially, I ran the network cable on the USB across the back of the monitor to the other hub on the opposite side where my keyboard and all those devices are plugged in. It looked like my keyboard then went crazy because all my windows started maximizing and minimizing over and over again, and even the fast switch opened up, which suggests like there's some keyboard key press. So I immediately unplugged the USB network device again, and it carried on doing it. And it's like, well, it's unplugged now, so obviously the wired network cable still running across the back of the devices was acting like an antenna and picking up interference that was then, well, God knows, killing the other hub that was behind there as well, I guess. So basically, I got so many devices here. I'm screwing up my signal essentially on all of them. So well, we'll keep trying. I'll get it figured out. I'm pushing my luck. I mean, you can't see the setup I've got here, but I've got like 3 monitors on all sides here. I've got a keyboard, mouse. I've got multiple hubs, multiple hard drives. Got a laptop, a big desktop PC. I can't turn the desktop on at all with the laptop plugged into the 4K monitor because the 4K signal degrades because of the interference from the laptop, from the desktop computer's fans and things. So yeah, I say I think what I got to do is I got to go through all of my cables, make them all as short as possible, and maybe get some of those little ferrite, those loop things that stop the interference traveling down the wires or something. Well, anyway, be a challenge. But we're on Wi-Fi at the moment, which, if you've got interference problems, logic would tell you that Wi-Fi would be worse. I would have thought, but no, apparently it's better. So maybe I just need to run everything across Bluetooth instead. Anyway, as I say, it was test day, which is why I got all the lights running, because I didn't want to get everything figured out for no lights and no webcam, and then try it all on the Halloween one with all the lights and the webcam and find it didn't work. So as I say, it's a learning experience. Yeah, I mean, I've had problems with things like USB before. I've had odd problems with the odd device doesn't work on the odd machine, and you kind of point it, or the odd port, and you point it and you swear and you shake your fist at it and you get on with it. But when you're live streaming, you can't do that. You can't have 10 minutes of downtime. You can't poke things for 5 minutes before the stream if you're running late. So you got to kind of get some kind of setup that works perfectly every time without fail, which is why I bought the new laptop to do the job. Now, one solution, I'll be honest, one solution would probably be to just unplug the monitor and the keyboard and just run straight off the laptop monitor and keyboard. But comfort-wise and positioning-wise, that's going to make other problems, you see, because I couldn't sit here and I can't see the laptop screen from here for starters. The laptop screen's also very high res and isn't particularly comfortable to work on. So I was hoping to use the main desktop screen and keyboard, which is why I've got all these converters for the USB-C to HDMI and what have you. So yeah, Jimmy T, I can see your "well, he's back" message on the laptop screen, but the screen here doesn't seem to have updated it, does it? Let's just see if we can. Oh, there we go. I did not add a browser source. You lie. I've broken it. Just a second. I can fix this. That thud was me dropping the controller on the floor. No, I didn't. Wasn't me rage quitting. Oh, it's lost all the palette. How's it managed that? How's it managed to lose the palette? So the network will probably go down again by the time I got this fixed. That's not right either. I keep backups of OBS with good settings because unfortunately I don't think there's any undo button. So if you've got your setup perfect and then you accidentally delete an object, you can't undo it. So I save backups like every day when I'm making changes to the layout and things, just so that if things go wrong, I can get the old settings back. So I'll get the palette back from that. But you'll have to have the white window for now. Let's turn this off and see if the network goes down again. Maybe what I need to do is put the Famicom on the other end of the room with a nice big cable, a nice big analog cable to the computer. It was interesting to note, and I was suspicious at the time, if I use my HDMI box and I plug my HDMI box into an analog to HDMI converter and then plug the Famicom into that, it seemed to work better. All the devices worked okay. Now the only problem with that is it was causing a 2-second delay to the video on screen, so it was completely unplayable. So that was going to try Rockman now, which I am going to suck really, really badly at because I have played this recently. Well, maybe we won't play it at all if it's going to not work. I've bought a mini HDMI it's like a 7-inch monitor, and it's got HDMI and VGA in and things. And so in theory, I was planning, if need be, to plug the HDMI box, the pass-through on the HDMI box into that, and then play the game from that, or maybe use an analog splitter or something to do that. But it's going to mean more devices, isn't it? More interference. So I think it's actually going to make my current predicament worse. So let's not do that. Let's try and avoid doing that. Thank you very much. Good, is it? Let me get me some more isopropyl alcohol. Running a bit dry there. I tend to use isopropyl alcohol and white kitchen cream cleaner, which is abrasive, and that works. I've never had anything I've not got working with that. People seem to like, the Spectrum community for some reason like using pencil erasers. I have tried it, it does work. Yeah, so that's another one that's worth bearing in mind. It's I have got some really bad games working with the old kitchen cleaner. Nail varnish remover I've been known to use before now as well. One time I wanted to buy this game in town, and they hadn't tested it yet. They got it on there. I asked them if they got it, and they said they had, but it was in the untested pile. And when they tested it, it didn't work. And so they tried to get it working and couldn't, and they said, "Oh, sorry, you can't. We haven't got it." And I said, "Well, can I buy that copy, even if it's broken?" And so they sold it me really cheap because they couldn't get it working. And I took it home and just gave it a proper clean. It worked fine. So it was the NES version of Bonk, I think that was, PC Dengen, as it's called, the Famicom classic. Now, the way to play this game is there's an order you're supposed to play in that makes it much easier, and I have no idea what the order is. So we won't be doing that anyway. Maybe Airman. I can't remember this game. So Mega Man is one of the much more clever ones. The Rescue Rangers one didn't seem that advanced compared to what I remembered of it, but Mega Man's quite clever with regards to its use of. That's a good start. Mega Man's brutally difficult. I used to say this is one I won back when I was like 12 or 13 or something. But these days, it's just now. So I don't know if you can see those kind of drill things coming up behind the foreground, but they're obviously sprites because the big object has to be a tile. The NES can't do sprites as big, so anything that's that big, you can be absolutely certain is a tile. And that's the way all of the graphics in this game are done. They're basically tricking the system's limitations. So you know, if you've got a big enemy, if you consider this an enemy, I mean you could consider it just a wall or something. But if you can, the big enemies like this, they've got to be done in tiles, and that means they can't move basically because they're limited to an 8x8 pixel grid. So yeah, as I say, these games were really built around the hardware limitations, and it does kind of bug me a bit when you see these people make these remakes that are that look like NES games, but they're not NES games, because it's like, well, you've not got any of the limitations, and often I'll look at them not realising that they're not a real NES game, and I'll be looking at it thinking, well, how's that NES game doing X, Y, Z? Because I didn't know the NES could do that, and then you realise it's not a NES game, that's how it can do it. And it's like, well, you've not made a NES game because you're not actually adhering to the limitations of the NES, either because you just don't understand what they are, or because you didn't want to bother, which... Is that platform not coming back? And as I say, it's like, well, the skill of the NES and part of the design of the games was about creating good things within the restrictions of the hardware. It wasn't just about creating a game in 4 colours. And they say they pretend that they understand that or whatever, and they just don't, because they say their game is obviously impossible on the real hardware because they don't work within the sprite limitations or the colour limitations or whatever. So it's like, if you really wanted to write a modern NES game, you would have to have the same sprite limitations and the same colour limitations, and even if you were programming for, you know, programming in C on Windows or something, you would still have to have the same technical abilities of the hardware to actually have a game that truly had the same look to it. And so, I don't know about that more modern Mega Man game. There was a modern Mega Man game released, and I think maybe that did. I mean, it's possible because it was the original authors, I believe, that maybe they did actually understand what the original hardware gave to the game, so to speak. Because, as I say, part of it is the size of the enemies, it's the way the enemies move, and a lot of it. Say it's like, well, that big enemy ain't that big angry looking face that I'm standing on, that's not moving. It physically can't do it. There's just no way that the NES is moving an object that big unless it moves in 8x8 blocks. So let's go to the stage select. Let's try the Metal Man. If anyone can remember which the easiest level is, please shout up and I'll play the easiest level instead of dying like this over and over again. But so anyway. Is this one easier? Some of these levels are very tough if you play them in the wrong order, but then I'm sure, as you know, after you get each power up from defeating a previous enemy, you have special skills, and that can make a previously very difficult level suddenly much more easy. So you know, when I was young, we had an order that we did the levels in, which kind of tried to take advantage of those of what we considered to be the correct of which power-ups made which levels easier. So, but as I say, I've long since forgotten that kind of thing. It's a bit this is a bit fraudulent, me owning all these games these days, because as I say, I don't have time to even get good at them anymore. So it's a shame they just sit in plastic boxes, rusting away gradually, probably. But, so that's really the reason why I started doing these videos, is because you know, maybe some people will join in and watch along and get some amusement out of it, and if they don't, then at least I get an excuse to play the games without feeling like I'm totally wasting my life playing the same games I did when I was 12. Because that's the trouble, isn't it? It's like even if I'm waiting for trains and things, I still try and read programming documentation or just do something vaguely useful rather than just sitting around on the NDS all the time. So I don't really play any games anymore. So I thought it'd be a bit of fun playing them on live stream. Just give me an excuse. Although it is turning more into, I guess, the signalling problem with the USB networking issue. But I don't know. Maybe I can get a job on a USB IT support desk instead. Ah! Curse you, God, for making me this way. Is this the easier level or is this the harder one? I'm feeling it's easier. As I say, there's a very small, I think there's a very, very slight latency. There's got to be some kind of latency with all the analog to digital conversion, but it's not bad. If I were to use it to claim my poor skills were just the latency issue, I would be a stinking liar. It's definitely just that I am now awful at these games after years of not playing them. But, damn it. So anyway, if you're new to this stream by some miracle, then please subscribe if you want to see me play more games badly. I do programming tutorials as well. Not tutorials. I'm trying to actually write some of the more basic tutorials on stream. So on Friday we've got it's called Start Your Day with 68K. That will be Thursday if you're in the UK. I'm not sure what time it is in the US, probably midnight or something crazy, but it's 5 AM in Japan, you see, so I call it Start the Day with 68K, and we'll be doing some 68,000 programming. We'll probably be writing Hello World for a machine like the Genesis, because the let's jump too early there. The Super Simple series that I did the Hello World and all of that kind of thing before, that's going to move on to the 68,000 systems now, because as I said before, the bulk of my 68,000, well, all of, to be honest, let's try a different level. The 68,000 tutorials I've done so far, I've run out of them. I've not got any more pre-prepared, so I'm going to start doing some basically recap ones with the Simple series. So hopefully that'll give me some content while I'm working on new things and building up some new content to do for later lessons. So anyway. Dog. Some of I think the later games you got like this flying dog thing, and I was just wondering if I couldn't remember which game that came in. I went the wrong way. I think this might have some interesting... here we go. So we got a palette switch there. So they've just turned everything black. And then... I love this kind of thing. I mimicked this in... Well, should we say mimicked rather than ripped off? I did this in Chibi Akuma's episode 1. I did the same effect with the palette switch when enemies came on the screen. Because I think it's a really cute effect. Very simple as well, of course. They're just switching the colours of the background tile map according to what's on the screen or not on the screen. Very, very simple effect. Now, I was wondering if in some cases they were going to use, because sometimes you'll see like the entire screen will go dark, and then some huge boss battle will start, and it'll be actually, well, they're using the tile map for the boss, so they had to make the screen go dark to get rid of all the other tiles on screen. As I said before, a lot of the time when something looks like an artistic choice, it was actually a technical one, that they needed to have the background black because they wanted to use the tile map for something. In this case, I don't think there's anything like that. I think it's just I think this is just a pure artistic decision. And once again, I probably can't leave the screen, otherwise that guy, no matter how many times I've already hit him, he probably regains it all, doesn't he? Ah, yeah. Ah! Yeah, and once again, as I said, they go off the screen, they come back. How do I... No! Oh dear. Well, so as I say, I find it rather ironic that the Wi-Fi is working better than the wired. I've never heard of that before. I guess that's a real credit to how good Wi-Fi is now, really. I mean, the Wi-Fi hub I'm using here, it's just a tiny little USB one. So it's not... it's nothing special. But I mean, my bandwidth is good as well. I was assuming there'd be a slight extra, an extra drop in the bandwidth, or a slight increase in the latency, but it seems fine. So maybe my insistence on just a sec, just let me check this chat window is correct. Switch back to top chat. So maybe my my sort of traditional sticking to assumption that wired is best is just out of date. It's certainly not helped me any today. So we'll I'm going to have a look at all of my cables on all the computer hardware, and I'm going to try and make any changes I can to make them shorter, because if I've got USB leads and things, maybe some of them can be shortened or repositioned to reduce. Say they're obviously acting as a giant analog antenna for picking up the interference coming off the Famicom, I think is what's happening. But so I'm surprised. I'm very surprised that network problem happened. I really didn't expect that. Okay, so let's see if we can do this time. Jump! Jump! No! I'm terrible. I'm absolutely terrible these days. Let's try a different level. I'm scared of resetting this now. I'm worried all my cameras are going to black out or something on me. So, let's try a different one. Let's see what we got. So we tried Airman. We tried Woodman. Woodman, I think that's got some... slightly ironic, you know, you've got this sort of robot theme and you've got wood. It's not really robotic, is it? But I used to really like Mega Man back in the 80s or maybe early 90s. I guess it would have been early 90s. I'd have played it, of course. But I've never had even the slightest interest in the later machines, because Mega Man, it went to the SNES and it went beyond the SNES, and it just always felt to me like, again another one that it was the limitations that made it, and as soon as those limitations were gone, it was like, well, what's the point of it? And Dizzy is one that I've never seen the point of on outside of the I love Dizzy on the CPC, but when they moved it to the NES, it was just like, and the 16 bits as well, because it was on the PC, it was just like, well, what's the point of this? Dizzy was always a screen flicking game with very simple graphics and very simple gameplay, and now it's not got very simple graphics, but it's still got very simple gameplay. It just felt like, well, so here we go. So is that sprites? I think that actually might be using sprites there, just based on the fact I can see it flickering. I think that big enemy there was entirely sprites, and so they would have been using them all basically. But anyway, stop chasing me! Stop chasing me! What on earth are those? I mean, those flying things are obviously supposed to be based on bats, but they look more like flying bombs or something. I have this distinct feeling I need a better weapon for this level. don't know. I say everything seems to be taking many hits, and I don't seem to be able to kill them before they kill me. So, as I say, if you win a level, you get that enemy's. So, anyway. The NES was one of these machines that did see heavy upgrades to it over the years. As I said before, the original machine just had 2K of video RAM, and it also had a 16 by 16 colour palette limitation for the tiles. I didn't mention that. The Chip and Dale game is the one to look at that for. I don't know if this has it. This one probably still has that limitation, but it's very clear on the Chip and Dale game. Whereas this one, it's not so clear. But yeah, they kept upgrading they put upgrade chips in, an extra memory in the NES cartridges, and that's what that Codemasters what was it called, Aladdin, was it, something like that? There's that Codemasters machine cartridge that had a sub cartridge plugged into it, and they announced it was something. I'm bored of this game now, and they announced it was like a big upgrade for the NES, and it wasn't really a big upgrade for the NES, and it had about 3 games ever released for it. Now, for a joke, I'm going to play this one. This is it's called Juoki, which means Monster King Legend. Now, this is Altered Beast. This is Altered Beast for the NES, and it's awful. It's Altered Beast is this game that I only ever knew when I was a kid as a Genesis game, Sega Genesis. I knew someone had a Genesis, and we'd occasionally play it, and it was. I think it came with most of the Genesises that were released, or Genocide that were released, maybe that's the plural there. So everyone had it, and everyone knew it, and it was a good game. So, but I never played it on any of the other systems. But when I came to Japan, I saw it was out for the NES, so I thought, oh yeah, I'll buy that. But all kinds of crazy stuff. I used to go into town every week, and I'd always come back with a couple of games every week, and they just built up to the mess you can see now. So it was one of the ones that I just basically bought because it's like, well, I need to buy something because I'm going to town. So, and it's awful. It's unbelievable how bad it is. The PC Engine version's okay. The Genesis version's great, but this is just. I mean, firstly, look how tiny the main character is. The bottom half of the screen is just doing nothing, and already the blooming sprites are flickering, and there's hardly anything on screen. It just doesn't look anything like what it's supposed to, and it's. I'm trying to work out how to jump here. Oh, I have to press up twice. Okay. I guess they're. Hey, are you doing that? I guess they're sort of compensating for a lack of joy buttons or something. Maybe certain combinations of up and fire do upwards punches or something, and that's why I'm having to double jump to jump in the air. Let's see if we can get to the first boss and have a laugh, because it's going to be terrible. If you remember, the first boss was a full screen height sprite, so the NES can't do a full screen height sprite. So they're going to have to. They're going to have to do some kind of tile map trick, or it's going to be very small. Either will be funny. So let's see. Oh, look at it. Oh, stop it. I mean, I'll give them their due though. They've got all the colours in there, because I remember that blue guy, and these little zombie guys are. Yeah, good point, Jimmy. A Sega game on Nintendo. I don't know who wrote it. Yeah. I can't port Chibi Akumas to this because it's 6502, so none of the code would work. So it would be a rewrite. I mean, it's the only. Oh, here we go. Now I'm the. I mean, it's actually. I'll give it its due. The the Amstrad CPC version was a lot worse. A lot worse. I think this is kind of bad but playable, whereas I think the Amstrad CPC version, you know, you wouldn't want to play it for this long. But anyway, I say it's just. I think the main thing that's getting to me is the bottom half of the screen is just entirely that life bar. It's like, okay, you got sprite limitations. I get it. You got to redesign your game a bit, but you know they could at least have a nice animated sky or something. I mean, you could have shown a giant wolf down there and made it look a bit more inspiring or something. It's just a nasty grey thing. Oh, here, that's the big boss fight, guys. Okay, so here we go. Let's see what happens. Yeah. So I told you the background would have to go black. I've died. Oh dear. I mean, even that thing. Look at the tiny little guy in the middle. This was like a big, exciting scene on the Genesis. It's like, okay. You've got tough limitations to work around, but. You know, I love it when people are creative and come up with ways of working around tough limitations, but they just haven't tried. It's just like, well, if we make half the screen just the score, then that'll solve that problem. And well, we'll just make all the sprites tiny. No one will care, you know. It's like, hey, look at Ninja Turtles and how close that was to the arcade, and they even added levels to Ninja Turtles. And then look at this thing, and it's like. Yeah, this isn't right. This isn't an acceptable conversion, is it? I mean, what they should have done, I think, is made the sprites bigger, and then had less enemies on screen at a time, and if necessary, make the enemies slightly tougher to compensate. But they aren't. I mean, they aren't hitting the limitation of the on-screen sprites there. It's like 8 per line or something, and that my player character's only 2. I mean, to be fair, I mean this is I don't mind this, you know, this giant boss battle with the black background. It just feels like, well, if they'd have had a little bit of background, I think those things falling on me have got to be sprites. So they've got to have the whole tile map available to them to do this thing. Well, anyway, as I say, they've got, you know, these old games, these 8-bits that are ported from 16-bits, and that's all right. You know, that's quite nice. I quite like that because that is what it did in the original. The giant head rises up, and then it steals all your power-ups. Is it stealing my power-ups? In the original, the balls flew off you. Now this level looks a bit more colourful. It's a bit better. Still, absolutely tiny sprites. But I don't get it because look at the size of the sprites in this, and then look at the Ninja Turtles. The Ninja Turtles in that game are much bigger than this. So it's not like this is all the NES could do or anything. No, I need it. Oh well, I missed that, didn't I? Oh, anyway, I just wanted to show you this one to basically laugh at it because, as I say, it's one of these ones that there's no other way you're going to want to play that. It's not good. It's not good at all. So, let's have a go at Ninja Turtles 2. Where's my camera? Ninja Turtles 2 here. So, this is called Ninja Turtles 2. If you remember, the first one was called Gekkei Kame Ninja Den, and then Turtles 2, the coin up in the West, was called Ninja Turtles, and so Turtles 2 in Japan is Turtles 3 in the West, which I never even saw in the UK. I don't think it probably came out in the UK. I got Turtles 2 just right at the end of the NES era, you know, when the Super Nintendo was coming in. So hang on a minute. No, I am right. I thought for a moment I'd got mixed up there, because that's looked like the introduction to the other one. So this is turtles are bored and go on a beach holiday in whatever, Florida Beach. Yeah, they're on vacation at Florida Beach. Oh, God's sake. It was any excuse, wasn't it, back then, you know. Oh, let's have it at a beach. What can be the excuse? Oh, well. They're on holiday. There's some digitised speech in this, which is very impressive. I say these... I have played a couple of years back, well, many years back now actually, but I played this all the way through on an emulator with like cheats, just to see what the game was like. It's tough because it's not a bad game, but it's not really got any anything on top of the first one. And I think in the case of this game, I think the first game really pushed the hardware to the limit. I don't think there was any more they could have really done. Say it was. I think this one is like, well, yeah. Say it's more of the same, but there was nothing else they could. There was nothing left for them to do. They do a lot of clever tricks. So there's a vertical scrolling level where they're like really grinding the tile map to make parts of the screen scroll and parts of the screen static. But they did the diagonal scrolling part in the second one in the same way. And as I say, there's some kind of speed race. I can't remember what it is, whether it's on water or land or skateboards or something. But as I say, it was, again, it's like, well, they've done the same kind of things as the first one did in slightly different ways, but it's just more of the same. But I guess, you know, it's fair enough. It was another one of these ones where the first one was based on something, and the second one was based on just the success of the first one. So I got no criticism for doing that. I can't blame them for releasing another game when the first one was so highly regarded. And it's not like this is botched or rushed in any way. It's a good game. You have one of the new things you have is you can press both buttons and each character has a special move, but it uses up your health. So why do it, you know, unless you're playing with a cheat mode. But as I say, it's a nice little game. Now, one interesting bit of trivia I have heard on the same basis is, I don't know if you remember well, of course you remember the Moonwalker game on the Genesis. Now, the arcade Moonwalker game was completely different. So I don't think they did anything similar there at all, whereas the original Turtles arcade game on the home systems was based on the coin-up version that was in the arcades. So this was then just a spin-off of that. But with the Moonwalker game, they were planning to do a sequel to the home version, which again would have had completely no basis to the arcade, but was just based off the success of that first Moonwalker game. But they cancelled it because of the rumours about Michael Jackson. Basically, the first lawsuit started up, which I always remember because it kind of irks me a bit when people the press were getting very wound up recently and saying, oh, all these rumours and things, and it's like, well, I'm sorry, but these rumours have been going on most of my life, so if you're suddenly outraged now, you haven't been paying attention. So I don't care what your judgment is, but your judgment shouldn't have changed, because if the press didn't notice what was being said about him in the 90s, they were being willfully ignorant. So anyway, as I say, it's just interesting. It's interesting to see the sequels. It would have been nice to. I would have been interested to see what they'd have come up with, because that is a good game. Really, I think the only problem with the Moonwalker game is, in my opinion, the first level is the style of the first level is the best. It's like, well, after you've played the first level, you've kind of played the best of it. Whereas really, you want it somewhere in the middle, not too far from the start that no one ever sees it, because most people will never win the game, but not right at the end where no one. Either, because as I say, but not at the start either, because if you peak within the first 30 seconds, then will anyone even buy it? Because they'll just play it around one of their friends' houses and then get bored of it or something. So as I say, the Moonwalker game, I do like it. I have got it over here. It's a nicely designed game. It would have been nice to see a sequel, but as I say, the game's popularity hasn't dwindled, but the celebrity's popularity is not really what it was. So it's a shame. But I don't know what's happened recently with the Turtles games. I've not been following them because I know they've had a bit of a reprisal. I did play a long time ago a PC demo for a game that did seem to be trying to bring back this very arcade style of sideways action. There are some there's a DS, there's an advanced game and there's a DS game, but my feeling is they actually went backwards, because this is like a 2D game but you can move up and down and it's got vertical scrolling and things. And the feeling I've got, if I remember correctly, is that the Game Boy Advance version was completely 2D, and so there was no kind of parallax up and down movement at all. You could jump in the air, but that was it. It's my recollection. And then there was a 3D game on the DS, I think. I think there was a game with basic 3D on the DS, because the DS could do some 3D on it when it put its mind to it. But again, it was like, well, Turtles in Time was kind of where this series lost me, to be honest. And even Turtles in Time, the graphics were great, but I mean, there's a sort of there's a parody quote, isn't there, about, you know, series that have gone past their best, and they always do. First they do in space and then they do in time, because as soon as you've run out of ideas, your only ideas are left to either travel through space or to have time travel and go into the past. And it's like, well, as I say, in the case of Turtles in Time, they missed Turtles in Space and just went to, let's have them all on a pirate ship. And it's like, well, okay, does that make any difference to the gameplay? No, it doesn't. No, but they'll all have eye patches on. Yeah, okay, that's I can do without that. I just I would have preferred you'd have stuck with the regular stuff, you know. But I think one good thing about, if I remember correctly, I think they brought a lot of the rarer turtle characters into this version, the ones that they didn't use in the first one. Or maybe I'm thinking of Turtles in Time. It's been a while. Beat him up. So, as I said before, they were pushing even just this two character battle here is really pushing the hardware sprites of the NES to the limit, because you'll see little bits of me are glitching out, or him are glitching out here and there when the bullets are firing. And the original arcade version of the first game, the prequel to this, had a boss battle where you fought Bebop and Rocksteady at the same time, and the NES version replaced that. And I think it was just that they realised that there was no possible way they could make that battle work within the sprite limitations of the hardware. So, yeah, as I say, it's really quite. Here we go. Yeah, so I think we had. Am I right in saying we had a scene like this, but you were on like skateboards or something? And so I don't think there was a water version. But again, sprite limitations. Look at how badly the sprites are glitching out on their surfboards just because of the limitations. But I'll give them their due. They really tried. They really made this system do everything it could for this game. Very, very impressive. As I said before, when I got this game, the prequel. When I got the prequel to this as a child, it was kind of, I had the NES and the Amstrad at the time, and it was just trying to weigh up which one was the one to buy. And the NES one was expensive. I think it was £50 or something. It was crazy expensive for the day, and the Amstrad version would have probably been 15. So it was massively more expensive. And also, yeah, I had a demo of the CPC version, and the CPC version was actually more colourful. And I think in some cases it actually has more, because the CPC has no hardware sprites. I think in some cases it's actually more arcade accurate, in the sense that there's more stuff on screen at once. Although saying that, I'm being attacked by 6 people at once there. That's incredible. This version, the prequel to this at least, only tended to have 3 enemies on screen at once because of the sprite limitations. So the CPC version really did a good job for the CPC hardware, but the speed of the NES version and the music, because the Amstrad version, they ditched the music at the last minute. Some coders have found the original music was all coded up and all on the disc, but it doesn't play it. And they're speculating, probably accurately, that the reason is that the frame rate isn't good on the version, and the music would have probably slowed it down. The music on I can only comment on my own game. Chibi Akuma's, the music on Chibi Akuma's slowed the game down by about 20%. I did toy with the idea of having a turbo mode, which would have disabled some of the functionality. I think it's even coded in some of the versions, but in the end it became a debugging problem, because with episode 2 the background was more complex and it was taking up quite a bit of the processing power, and I didn't want, and it was machine code that was sort of custom for each level, and so adding the turbo mode would have meant adding extra code to every single level and testing every single level twice, and I just couldn't do it. It was just too much work, so it never got in the game. But in theory there was going to be a mode that would have had turned off the extra colours, turned off the music, and even turned off the background. It was like switchable up to 3 stages, so there would have been a very, very simple, very fast version of the game and the normal version. But in all honesty, I didn't think anyone would play the faster version just because it would be too simple. I have got one more game here, haven't I? So this is one I never heard of until I came to Japan. It's Dig Dug 2. You can't see on that camera because I've got the low res filters on. Yeah, can you see it there? Dig Dug 2 there. So we're going to play this one. I played Dig Dug maybe once as a child on a PC, and I've never played Dig Dug 2 at all, and I've never played Dig Dug 1 really either. It's not a game that I have really any recollections of. So the reason I got this one is there's this TV series in Japan called Game Center CX, which is a guy who's far better than me playing games, and it's a bit of they do a bit of comedy in it, and it's in Japanese obviously, and I was watching it just because firstly I play games, I like games, and also it was quite handy to learn Japanese, just listening to people speak, and having some because most of the episodes are gameplay, there's relatively little speech, and when they are talking, they're talking about something that's visually grounded. The guy dies, he's going to be saying something about dying. The guy's getting attacked by a dragon monster, he's going to be probably saying something about dragon monsters. So it's easier than just sort of random conversation that you don't necessarily know what they're talking about. So it's easier to follow. So I was watching that, and he played this on there. And he was obviously really, really enjoying it, and I, watching it, like, yeah, I can see why it looks brilliant. So it wasn't that expensive, because some of the games now, everything's expensive in Japan now, these retro consoles wise. Most things are anyway. You can still get Super Mario 3 for the Famicom for about $3, about 300 yen, and occasionally you'll find a Famicom like this one was when I got it. This is a very cheap one, which is why the front plate's missing, and I did the analog mod myself so that it's got the composite out, but you can find an unmodded one that will still work for about $3 as well. So you could, in theory, still, even now, get Mario 1, Mario 3 and the Famicom for $10. So there is still cheap stuff out there, but it's getting harder. About 2 years ago, there was a stack of Super Famicoms like this high, just everywhere, and they were all $3, and now there's just 1 or 2, and I'm pretty sure a year or 2 there'll be none. So it's it's past, the good times have passed. I haven't got them here, but my Famicom disk system, I paid proper money for that because it worked, but the Famicom discs I got, what's it called, Akumajo Dracula game, what's it called, Castlevania. I got that for about $3 on disc because it was in the junk section, and you'd never see that now. Not unless it was like cut in half or something. You won't see a Famicom disc in the Famicom disc cartridge in the junk section for $3 now. It's just that's a thing of the past. And a lot of my PC Engine games on cartridge I bought from the junk section. I even got the Devil's Crush game, the pinball game. I already owned it, but they had a cheap copy in the junk section and it worked fine, so I bought it as a spare. But now you don't see any PC Engine games in the junk section. Not any at all, nothing. So they've obviously realised that, they're not a thing to be treated as junk anymore. Put them in the proper section and put them for $10 or more. So, as I say, the cheap days are pretty much over now. But I still pop in most weeks just on the off chance, just because you basically have to pop in a lot and know you'll be unlucky most days, because occasionally you'll be lucky and you'll get something interesting. So Yeah, so, but it's been a long time since I've got anything particularly exciting. I got a Game Boy. I got a really cheap Game Boy just the other week. It was a cheeky bonus purchase for me. So what you have to do here is you have to chop up the island and bits of the island collapse, and I can't remember how it decides which bits to collapse. And then we can kill the enemies by staying on the bit that doesn't collapse. So you chop the island up over and over again. Doki Doki Panic. I have Doki Doki Panic. That was one of the reasons I bought it. The main reason I bought it, truth be told. Yeah, I've got it. My Famicom disk system is broken. Let me show you this. This is good. You'll want to see this. My Famicom disk system is broken, so it's in parts behind me. That's what all this mess is back here. And I've now got some drive belts to try and fix it. But if it doesn't fix, I have a backup. This is amazing. So this is the ROM pack of the Famicom disk system. Remember I said that the Famicom has got almost no memory? So the ROM pack is basically, the RAM pack is basically a memory upgrade for the Famicom. It's got all of the RAM that the cartridge would usually have as ROM, and then the disk system copies its data to that RAM. So this would usually plug into your Famicom disk drive that's broken and bits behind me. But for like $30, I've got this. So it's plugged into the cable that should go into the Famicom disk drive. You plug it into your PC, and then you can when it boots up, it's got a disk select, and then you can press the button once or twice to swap the side of the disk. And so in theory, I can play my Doki Doki Panic and my Super Mario 2 off this thing instead. So I've actually got Super Mario USA for this machine because they released it later on as a separate cartridge. So what I wanted to do is do a comparison where we'd play the Doki Doki Panic original Super Mario 2, then we'd play Super Mario USA, and then maybe we'd play the Lost Levels, which I've got as well. I've got the Lost Levels on Super Mario 2, the Lost Levels, the Japanese version. I've got that on Famicom Disk System, and I've got it on the Advance. They released it on the Advance as well at one point. But yeah, Doki Doki Panic, has it ever been released in the West? It should be. It should be, because it's, I got no... Some people complain about Mario 2, saying, oh, it's not the real Mario 2, and it's like, well, it's a good game. I mean, it's a nice game, and I'll be honest, one of the things I can't help feeling about it is it's actually one of the more inspirational, more creative installments to the Mario series, in the sense that if you look at Mario 2, all of the stuff in it was new, whereas all of the other games have really been using bits of the previous games, which I say is, understandable, because obviously you want to stick with what people like. But things like the Shy Guys and the picking up the items and carrying them over your head, I thought those were quite cute features. So the fact that they came from the game that wasn't officially a Mario game feels to me that game enriched the Mario series rather than being a fake Mario game, if you would call it that. No! So yeah, Doki Doki Panic. I like both of those. I do like both. So I think I'm trying to remember the rules, but I think you can only cut the island up from those little holes in the ground, and when you cut the island up, I think it's always the larger part that survives. I don't know how I fell in there. I didn't think that would happen. Okay, anyway. Okay. So that mushroom do. Yeah, I mean, the other thing you probably know, the Famicom disk system wasn't just readable from the Famicom side. So so Mario 2 can actually save it. Sorry, not Mario 2. Doki Doki Panic can actually save your status on the Famicom disk system. So you don't need to win it all in one go like you would with Mario 2. And that's also why, if you've seen the Angry Video Game Nerd, the old Hide Glide game, there's those save load options that just show a password or some nonsense, and he's quite justifiably complaining about what a stupid idea it is. Well, they've done a rush port from the Famicom disk system, because obviously on the Famicom disk system it would have literally saved your status, whereas on a cartridge-based system they can't save your status, so they've just slapped on a fairly inadequate password system instead. Now, if I chop this up, I can't chop that, so I've got to chop it up from the other side, haven't I? Yeah. My only complaint about this game, I think, really, is you don't do any digging. It's called Dig Dug, but you don't dig anything. I mean, you got that little jackhammer, but the original one you were actually underground the whole game, and this one it's like, well, it should be called Island Chopper or something. Let's get that mushroom, see what it does. I say it's quite a fun little game. It's this is one of those ones that just remind you that if you're just starting out programming, there's no reason to worry about particularly your game being limited. You know, I mean, we've barely got any scrolling here. We've only got a few sprites on the screen, but it's a brilliant game. So yeah, you could program the basics of this up in something like Basic, I think, and as I say, in assembly, if you put some time in, I'm sure you could make something like this. So if I chop this, which bit's going to disappear? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I thought I was on the other side. I thought I was going to survive that. Anyway. Well, I mean, I'm sure you can figure this one out. So the entire background is tile map, obviously, and all of the main characters are sprites. It's very, very simple game, graphically speaking. Does it ever scroll up and down? Does it just scroll left and right, I wonder? I'm suspecting maybe it never scrolls up and down, because you've got that high score at the top of the tile map there. There we go. So I've only got a couple of people in the chat, but if anyone's got any questions, just fire them out and I'll do my best to answer them, you know. So I don't mind if people don't talk, and I don't really mind if no one watches at all. It's just an excuse to play some games and test the hardware out. And as I say, I'm sorry about the hardware glitches again today. I'm still working it all out for the Halloween special, which will be easier. The Halloween special will be using almost an emulator. I'll be playing the 7th Guest the weekend after Halloween. Now, the 7th Guest, the version I'm going to be running, it's going to be run with the, what's it called? It's Scum32. Is it Scum32? I forgot what it's called. The emulator that supports the Groovy engine, the one that's used by all the Sierra games. I think it's Scum32 it's called. But that's what I'm going to be using this time, because it's easy to get started, basically. I think running it through DOSBox would be better, but I don't want it to be better. I want it to be authentic to what it really looked like. And also, I don't really have time to be messing with DOSBox and trying to get the settings right. So I've got it working with Scum very quickly, so that's what I'm going to use. But the game itself, of course, was a CD-based game originally, and just give a quick shout out. I don't know if you've never heard of that game or care about it, but the original games were the 7th Guest, that was the first game, and the 11th Hour, the sequel. Now, the company that made it went bankrupt, but they're now back, so you can actually buy the game on Good Old Games, which if you're interested in it, I'd suggest you do. I'm thinking of it, not because I need the game, because I've got the game, but they've actually got some behind the scenes stuff. So if I've read all of the content I've already got, because I've got the original book, they released a novelization of it, and I've got the the walkthrough, which also has some behind the scenes content. But if I read all that and still have time, I will buy the game just for the behind the scenes content of good old games. But if you want to play it, check it out there. But that aside, as I say, they went bankrupt before they made a third game. But there were some crazy fans of the game that have released, are nearly about to release an officially approved third game. So they're releasing this game called the 13th Doll. If you look on GOG, you can pre-order it now, and they're saying it's going to come out on Halloween. Now, they've, to be fair, said that a couple of years in the past, because they've been working on this for 15 years. No joke, they've been working on it for 15 years, because I've been following it all that time. And but this time they're saying, they've sent me, because I'm backing them on Kickstarter, and they've even emailed me hey, you can get your Steam keys now kind of thing. So I'm pretty certain they are actually going to release around Halloween. Might not be Halloween itself, but they're obviously very close to releasing. So again, if you're interested in the Seventh Guest, if you're interested in these classic point and click adventure games, have a look at that, and consider supporting them, because as I say, they've been working like lunatics for as long as I've been learning Japanese, is the truth of it. So I say, you get these people who claim things and never deliver, and they've been working like crazy. Now, to be fair, they did do a Kickstarter and they did take a bit of money, and there's been a few people who've been frustrated that the game hasn't been released yet after several years after the Kickstarter. But I know for a fact that the reason they did the Kickstarter was so that they could afford to do the video shooting, because this is a partially 3D rendered, partially live action game. And so they actually had to fly to, I would guess, America, because they got the original actor who played the main character in the original game to star in the new game. So they probably had to throw him a couple of quid. They probably had to fly a bunch of actors over there, set up, hire some kind of studio, set up green screens, get out the cameras, blah, 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 blah. So they didn't take a lot of money. I think they took about 50k, something like that. And I suspect that will have disappeared pretty fast when you're having to book hotels and pay for flights and pay for, as I say, a studio and lighting and what have you. Because, I mean, the lighting I've got here is £200 worth. So it's not trivial. It's not true. 3D rendering you can do if you're using Blender, you can 3D render for nothing, for no money nowadays if you're willing. But when you're actually shooting actors, and when those actors are not necessarily even in the same country, rather than me, that's all I'm saying. It doesn't sound. When I originally heard of the project, and you heard they were going to 3D render it, and you thought, oh yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I could imagine being able to do that myself. That's a project that an individual could take on. To design a few levels in a 3D package, render a few 3D graphics, create a bit of code to link all the 3D together, and make some animations and some puzzles and things. Pretty much anyone could do that if they had the time. And then you hear they're going to live action shoot actors on sets, on green screen sets, and they want to hire the original actor, and you're just like, right, okay, so now you need to find half dozen people who can act. You possibly need them to actually look like the original characters. You need them all to be in the same place at the same time. You need to shoot all the video in one go, and you need to not make any mistakes, because if you need to reshoot, you'll double your costs. So it's like, that was the point where I was a bit taken aback by what they were trying to attempt, because it's like, well, don't you just want to 3D render these characters or something, or just just have them off screen, or just have them as some really transparent ghosts that you can't see, so you can avoid this awfully difficult shooting that you're talking about taking on. So that's one that I'd thoroughly recommend you take a look at if you're interested in supporting these sort of amateur programming projects, because as I say, the amount of work and time they've put into it is just. They're not doing it for the money, that's for sure. You don't spend 15 years doing anything unless you're extremely dedicated to seeing it actually come to fruition. So I can't say any more about it at this point, because I I've got stuff that I want to go into in the video when I do the special event, but I just wanted to give an extra mention to them now because, as I say, they're about to go onto they're going onto Steam and they're going onto Good Old Games and GOG, and I recommend GOG because they're DRM free, and I'll only buy DRM free games these days. So that would be the one I would recommend you look at for either the 13th doll or the original 7th guest or the 11th hour. They're all on Good Old Games. So anyway, so I could play this for the rest of the day, I think is the truth, but I'm going to go and get some more games out of my box because I'm getting a little bit bored of this one. I think we need to change the source of conversation, shall we say, because it's fun to play, but it's so simple, there's not much to say about it. Take my headphones out. Dodge all the wires and lighting stands here. Get over to my games box. Loads of Rockman games. Pinball, very, very old game. Let's get that up. And let's have a go at something else. Something. Chase HQ, I didn't even remember that came out for the NES. Okay, so I've got a few more here. So I don't know if you could hear me there. So what I've got is I've got Chase HQ, we'll maybe give that a go. I have got Parodius, which is a spoof of Gradius, it's quite fun. And I've also got a very, very nasty labelled pinball. Look at the colour of that label. It's all kind of discoloured. Now, I thought it'd be fun to play the pinball one because it's very, very old. And the point I thought would be interesting to make on that is just how much the NES evolved over the years because of those clever people coming up with new hardware upgrades to install into the cartridges that made it get better and better as it got older. And as I say, that's something that not just as a gamer, as a programmer, and as a sort of person who finds this sort of tech interesting, I find very respectable and impressive. And I think it's a shame you don't see it anymore. I mean, nowadays, there's no hardware upgrades at all, are there really? I mean, unless you count all that hardware junk that Nintendo seem to like slapping onto their Switch. I don't really count that myself. You do see some clever software stuff go on. There was some quite clever upgrades to the N64. They added some kind of MP3 capability to Conker's Bad Fur Day. I don't know if that was hardware or software, but it's very clever. And you do see some software tricks being done, like what's that shooter on the Nintendo DS with the very good 3D? Nanostray, is it? That was very impressive. They considering the Nintendo DS really just looked like a kind of portable Nintendo. Sorry, considering the 3DS looked like a portable N64 when it first came out and didn't look much better, Nanostray was really quite impressive. They really made it look like a system with some respectable 3D. So, I mean, if you think about it, this game here that we've got here is really quite indicative of the very early games that you saw on the Nintendo NES. I think of like the Donkey Kongs and things. You got very little animation on the screen, a few sprites maybe. I mean, how many sprites can you see here? I mean, that ball might might be 4, might just be 1. And that thing sliding left and right, 2. And probably everything else is tiles. And that blipping effect of that 100 bumper, that's probably just a palette switching effect. It's like... we went from this to Super Mario 3 and that Turtles game. That's the point I'm making. It's like, look at it. I don't mean that in an insulting way. As I say, I'm sure this is a fun game, and there's nothing wrong with it as a game. But from the point of view of the evolution of the console and how it went from being really little more than an Atari machine, just very basic games with a few sprites on them, like the Centipede type of games, to releasing games that they were able to port without any extra functionality to the Super Nintendo with Super Mario 3, and which they released as Mario All-Stars, really showed just how impressive the hardware became because of those upgrades. So we got some animation going on there, but I would bet that that's just the tile map again doing that. We've got no music even. So it's not even pushing the old CPU any. Anyway, so I just think it's curious occasionally to take a look at these earlier games, these simpler games, and just see the full breadth of the games that came out on the NES, and this is a branded game. This isn't some shoddy cheap thing that was rushed out of the door just because someone got a license or something. This is an official Nintendo game, but as I say, that's in no way trying to say that this is unacceptable as a game or anything like that. At the end of the day, the only purpose a game has is to be enjoyable, really, in this sense. So, it's a nice game. If I'd programmed this, I'd be quite happy with myself. I don't think there's anything technically wrong with it. It looks nice. It looks playable. Ball mechanics seem okay. But I say, again, I don't think if you were learning to program, I don't think it would be impossible for someone learning to program to write this particularly. No hardware scrolling, no real complex sprites. The later games, of course, will start to bend the limitations of the screen by relocating the sprites while the screen draws, and that's what I did with the that Game Boy example I was talking about earlier, switching the tile source halfway down the screen, 2/3 of the way down the screen, to get more tiles onto the screen than the hardware should be able to do. So, but again, that kind of thing's clever and it can have a nice effect. But then you're into problems with your debugging. It takes more time, or you have to be very clever, which, as I've said before, is why I look at that Vespertino and it sort of nearly brings me to tears imagining the debugging that it would take to do it. So I think BG Group, or whatever they call themselves now, I think they're just extremely clever. But for someone like me, if I attempted a game of that complexity, I'd just never finish it. I'd just be debugging it for months and months and then probably give up, or I have a nervous breakdown. Oh! What on earth is going on here? Is that Mario? You got like this bloke. I think that's supposed to be Mario and the Princess. I didn't expect that. And we seem to have some kind of seals or something in the middle of, on either side of the middle of the screen on the top as well. I don't know what that's all about. Anyway, I'm going to turn it off. It's a fun little game. But it's what year is this? Does it have the year on it? So that is 1983. I can't remember when, but sorry, I'd have been 2 when that came out. So I don't know when the Nintendo came out, but that has to be one of the earliest. For comparison, Ninja Turtles 2. Only 91. Interesting. 1991 that is. So that's only sort of 7 years afterwards. But anyway, as I say, it's just interesting to see that, I think, to compare these different eras of games. So now let's play Parodius. This is 1990. So now the basis of this game is basically that I think they ported the original. I think they took Parodius and then they swapped out the graphics and they added some weird quirky stuff. I can't remember which version I got of this first. I think I can't remember. Because the PC Engine version I think is the most faithful. I think the original one is the X68000 because Gradius was an arcade game and the arcade hardware and the X68000 are the same hardware. But there's loads of versions of this. There's Parodius, there's this version, there's the X68 and the PC Engine version, which are basically the same game just ported around. Then they've got, I think it's called Shabari Parodius or Hanashi Parodius, and it talks. It's got speech in it, but it's completely pointless because the game's so crazy and there's so much music you can't hear what it's saying. But it does talk, and that's the Super Nintendo version. And then there's Sexy Parodius on the arcade that I don't think that came out on the home systems. But and then there's Parodius Wars, which is like an Advance Wars game, and I may have that somewhere, but I've never really played it. I think that's a PlayStation game. Might have it. I can't remember. I've never played it though. It might be one of those ones I bought and just shoved on the shelf, and it's still on the shelf. So, but anyway, so this has come out on a lot of systems, and I'm not sure if it's not one that's still coming out. So we got the choice of the regular ship, boring. The octopus guy, who I think has got like a bandana in this one, and some of them he's got like a pair of pants on his head. We got the guy that's the thing from, what's the other one, Twinbee, and a penguin. So I'm going to go the penguin is the weirdest, so I'm going to go for the penguin. Have some penguin action. Auto power up, I'll go on then. We'll have easy. So we've got the bells from Twinbee. We got penguin from Penguin Wars, I don't know. And then, so we've kind of got all these weird swapped out sprites replacing the ones in the original Gradius. And we're now picking up candies to power ourselves up and things. I don't know what I just got hit by. It looks like a syringe or a baby bottle or something. So it's quite funny. I get amused by it. But this kind of been the one I played first though. Maybe it could have been PC Engine. It's just so rare you see PC Engine games for sale around this area now. I can't really remember. It would have been PC Engine or Super Nintendo, I guess. Must have been the first one I played. We're going to play PC Engine later. I was starting with the Famicom. I was thinking it would just be an easy one to just quickly just slap together and get set up. I wasn't anticipating the interference problems, or my terrible gameplay problems for that matter. Terrible gameplay problems. That's something we can't fix with relocating USB cables. Yes, game over. Let's try the octopus maybe. Maybe I'm more lucky with octopuses. There's another one a bit like this on the PC Engine CD. It's I don't know if you remember Bonk or PC Dengen as it's called in Japan. They released a I can't remember what it's called. They released a shoot 'em up. No, I'm getting mixed up. No, they released the shoot 'em up on the cartridge, and then they released another shoot 'em up on the. There's two. There's one on cartridge because I own it on cartridge, and there's a CD-based one and I don't own it. I do own the CD machine, but they're very expensive now. And while the one I've got worked last time I plugged it in, who knows if it still works now? So I won't spend money. I've got loads and loads of really cheap CD games that I got for 100 yen, but I won't pay proper money for games on CD really for these very old cartridge systems, because it's like, well, for these very old consoles, because it's like, well, console could die at literally any moment, and in some cases it's now beyond the price that I'm willing to pay to replace them, and I don't have the technical ability to repair them. So as I say, I got the PC Engine. It was sold broken. It was a PC Engine CD and a PC Engine combined, and it was about $5. and I don't think they tested it, or they tested it and couldn't make it work. But as usual, I took it home and cleaned it, and it worked fine. So I got a very, very cheap PC Engine CD, and they sell for $100 or more now. Maybe 200 actually, last time I saw. But anyway, as I say, I do own one. But there's the PC Engine CD during the later stages of its life, they really went to town on that. I mean, contradicting what I said earlier about hardware upgrading of systems. Come on. Maybe I should have used a joypad with autofire. The PC Engine CD, I forget how much the memory the PC Engine had. It had like, I can't remember, it had like a 16K or something fairly typical. Not particularly remarkable, but nothing unrespectable. And anyway, now they've got the CD with this massive amount of ROM-based memory, but it was slow. Because of CD, single-speed CD. And so they sort of obviously came up with this crazy idea of slapping 2 megabytes, I think it's megabytes, not even megabits, of RAM into a cartridge for the PC Engine hardware, and then filling that with data from the CD during the level loads, and then using the CD for music during the gameplay, which they did. And the result of this was they were actually able to run Neo Geo ports. They actually ported some fairly decent Neo Geo fighters to the PC Engine, and they look blooming good. It's like, this is nuts, you know, porting an arcade machine to this end-of-life home console. And I say, they did a good job of it. But the one I was going to tell you is, I can't remember, it's called Ginga Fraulein Una Fiery, I think it is, or something. It's an anime. I bought the anime on Laser CD, it's not very good, but the arcade game doesn't have anything to do with the cartoon. And they've essentially created a vertically scrolling shooter that's nearly Neo Geo standard on the PC Engine, and they've really they've used all of the tricks to the limit. They've got pre-rendered 3D, and they've got fake transparency, so they really went to town on it, and well, based on how many times I'm dying here, you can tell I suck at this, but it's absolutely rock solid hard, but it gives you a lot of lives, so you can see quite a bit of the game if you play it. And you know, you can get an emulator, and you can probably find the emulated CD somewhere, but it's, I say, as a technical feat on an end-of-life console, very impressive, because I say, you're like, okay, this doesn't look like a Neo Geo game. I'm not going to claim it looks like Blazing Star or anything, but it looks like Blazing Star. They dumped a huge amount of ROM onto the Neo Geo and used it for pre-rendered 3D, and that's exactly what this game did to the PC Engine. They just, it was a brute force attack. They used all of this extra RAM and all of this CD-ROM storage space to make a game that was really quite graphically impressive for, as I say, a system that was basically should have been finished off now. So yeah, worth the look if you ever get a chance. But there was some kind of spoof PC Engine shooter, but I obviously can't remember. Maybe it wasn't related to Bonk, maybe it was something else. But it was quite quirky and funny like this. I think you actually shot PC Engines, or you were a PC Engine shooting other things or something like that. There was some very, very strange sprites in it that really didn't look like anything you'd expect to see. So we've actually got some background now. We've started using the sprites, the tiles at last. So they've copied the bell mechanic. Now, I don't know if you saw that. You see there on the left-hand side of the screen at the bottom, the water's kind of gone brown. Now, what's going on there is the colours are actually being copied from the opposite side of the screen, because the tile map on the NES is so small that there's no spare tiles really that are off screen properly. And as I've said before, the nest tiles are 8x8, but the colours are defined at a 16x16 level. And even on Super Mario 3, hitting the floor, even on Super Mario 3, you will see, just my camera there. That's not working. It's stuck to the back with duct tape because I can't properly angle it on my monitor because it's a iToy camera. Even though the tiles are 8x8, the colours are 16x16, and even with Super Mario 3 they didn't manage to get around that limitation. Now, it's my understanding that the limitation could be broken by using a lot of extra memory in the cartridge, and there was some kind of switch where you could change the colour so they would use all 4 tile maps within the cartridge. But I've never done it, and as I say, I don't think even Super Mario 3 did it, which was one of the last games that I ever saw. So I think while it's theoretically possible, I think in practice it's not really done. But as I say, again, it was just to sort of point out that graphical glitch, which you can see going on all of the time in this game, and you can really see in an awful lot of games. And it's just the old NES had limitations, and they often showed up in the games, unfortunately. But you know, it never used to bother us when we were kids. You know, can't really remember anyone ever complaining about the fact that you would see the odd glitchy colour at the edge of the screen on Super Mario. It just wasn't important to us. We've got those horrible, they call them jail bars. I don't know if you can see those analog vertical bars. I'm sure you can. There is a mod you can do to the console to try and fix that. You have to pry up the chip and put metal underneath it or some nonsense. I can't be bothered. It's difficult for me to be too concerned. You hear of these people who do RGB mods to their consoles and things, and it's like, well, if you want perfect graphics, just open an emulator and use the emulator. Actually, you'll get better than perfect because you can use upscaling. So, as I say, I don't quite see the point of playing one of these old games on a 4K monitor with RGB, and then it's like, well, that's not what the game looked like. No one played. I used to, when I got my NES originally, I was playing it on a little portable black and white TV. That's how I played Mario for the first time, and then later on I had a cheap big colour TV, but I don't think it had composite in. I think we were still using the TV aerial socket, so there was distortion. It wasn't, you never saw these games without distortion in the 80s, because we just didn't have the hardware. Most people would have been playing on, most kids would have been playing on the cheap TV or the second TV or whatever. So as I say, it wasn't just, you weren't plugging it into some, most of us wouldn't have been plugging it into some massive rear projection HD TV in the mid-90s. It just didn't happen. I don't even think they were out even in the mid-90s. So as I say, the analog distortion for me is like, well, that's what, that to some extent was what you had. Now, I think the vertical bars may be worse these days. I think it might be one of these things that has got worse with age. But I think the actual graphical quality, apart from that of what you're seeing on the screen here, is probably better than I would have seen if I'd have been playing this in the 80s, in the 90s even, early 90s. I really wish I had a joypad with an autofire about now. I have a third joypad. Now, I'm sure you can probably see, they're actually hardwired into the back here. The joypad goes into the back here, and so you can't unplug them. But there is at the front, just here, where is it? Just here, there's a third port, and you can plug a third joypad into this machine. I have one. I've no idea if it works. I don't know how it works when you plug it in. I would guess the game probably has to understand, because looking at the documentation for the multi-tap, which I guess it's based on, the multi-tap, you actually have to code your software to read in the extra joysticks. So it probably only works for things like Bomberman, which we're expecting it. So whether it's actually any use for the autofire for this game or not, I don't know. I also have some crazy weird joypad that I bought literally just to take a photo. Let me get it. I'll show you it for a laugh. when I was doing my tutorials on the joysticks and joypads, I wanted to try and work on some better thumbnails to see if I could increase the viewing figures, and it didn't work. Spoiler, it didn't work. So I've not really bothered anymore. But I bought this because it was incredibly cheap. This was like $10 or something, $15. And it was mint condition, still boxed. So I thought, oh, whatever, I'll buy that. And I can't use it because, you see, this doesn't plug into the Famicom directly. It plugs in to another joystick that plugs into the Famicom directly. So this is the joystick 2 joystick. You need the joystick 1 joystick as well, which would have been far more expensive, at least now. And then maybe you can play things. So it looks nice as a prop. Made a nice thumbnail, but can't actually use it. So never mind. But, it's very, very cheap. So I don't mind that. It can sit on my shelf looking nice, even if it doesn't do anything worthwhile. Could be said for my gameplay skills as well, maybe. Not remotely worthwhile. Doesn't do anything practical. Anyway. I'm still trying to work. Why was the icon different there for the power? Oh, because of the ship. I see. Because I'm now the graduate ship. The power-ups have actually changed their mechanics. Because before they were the bell bouncing away, but now because I'm the classic graduate ship, they're actually following the graduate rules. That's strange. So yeah, I'm still trying to work out what's best to try on YouTube and what isn't worth even attempting, because I'm not really finding the things that you would expect to work in the sense of, I thought, well, I'll create nice thumbnails, even going to the extent of buying hardware just to take photographs of it, and I was airbrushing them and adding nice titles to them, and it doesn't seem to make any difference. And I've tried using, I've done all different kinds of titles, you know, positioning the words in different places. I won't do anything dishonest when I'm trying to create videos. You know, I'm not going to say 3 amazing secrets you must know about the Famicom and then do a programming tutorial, because everyone will just close it, downvote it, and even if they don't, it's just not the right way to do things. So I always try and do things in a legitimate way, but from the point of view of trying to alter the wording to optimize to get the best out of the algorithm. You know, I'm quite happy to put ZH assembly at the start, put it at the end, take it out the title and just call it Famicom Programming, or call it Nest Sprites, How to Program, or Programming Nest Sprites, or Master Nest Sprite. You know, I'll do that kind of thing, but I'm not going to call it Top 5 Secrets of Nest Sprites when it's a programming tutorial, because I say, even if I manage to sucker people in, they ain't going to watch it. It'll just close down as soon as they find out what it's like. So, but as I say, it doesn't seem to matter what thumbnail I pick or what title I use. It almost seems to be random which ones do well and which do badly. And I mean, it's like my Enterprise one that I uploaded a day ago. It's got 100 views. It's like, well, that's in 24 hours or something. It's pretty good. But the Commodore 64 one I did recently did terribly. The same topic. Sprites on the C64 got 50 views in 48 hours, and you know, the Enterprise got 100 or something. So it doesn't make sense. Excuse me. So I don't know what to make of that, really. But anyway, as I say, it's like you just try things a bit differently from time to time and just see how it goes. But I think really the truth, and this would be consistent with what I'm hearing from other people as well, is when my videos do well, they do well because people share them. And when they do badly because no one shares them. That's what I suspect is going on. You know, I mean, I'll just give you an example of that. My first Next Spectrum Next video did really well, like hugely well, and almost as well as the X64 videos, which were better than anything has done before on my channel. But then the next ones didn't get anything. It's like, say, being beaten by the old Enterprise again. And I think the reason was that everyone was excited by the first one and then they just lost interest, which is fine. But when I say it's like, well, the last Spectrum Next video did no better than any of my random CPC videos. I'm not going to keep making them if that's the case. I'm sorry. It's just Spectrum Next isn't finished hardware even. It's still changing. They're still changing the damn firmware on me. I was trying to program the sprite tutorial that I've been working on for the next. It isn't finished, and I'm not finishing it until I stop messing with the hardware. Because I was trying to get the 4-bit per pixel sprites working, as per the documentation. They didn't work, and then I eventually found an old version of the documentation and realised they'd only just added them. And the reason they don't work is the emulator hasn't been changed yet, and the reason the emulator hasn't been changed yet is because they literally only just changed it. And it's like, well, you're supposed to have released the thing by now, you shouldn't still be messing with the hardware spec. But they are, and they're not only messing with the hardware spec, they're not making proper documentation saying, oh well, you know, in the documentation you would hope it would say 4-bit per pixel sprites were added with revision 1B on 1st of 1st 2019 or something like that, so that when you're trying to code it, you know, okay, well, my system's old firmware, or oh well, hang on a minute, I'm planning on releasing this commercially, I need to make sure that I'm not going to get loads of complaints from people using old hardware, so I'll just use 8-bit per pixel sprites. That would be what I'd hope for. I mean, really, I'd hope they'd finish the firmware and stop messing with it, but as I say, my complaint is really that the reason I'm programming old hardware is so I don't have this. I want hardware that's finished changing and is fixed, and you have a definitive answer on what the correct functionality is, and the definitive answer is the hardware that was released back in the day. So if the emulator doesn't match the hardware, it's the emulator's fault. Whereas now you've got a situation where the hardware is constantly changing, and even if the emulator was perfect yesterday, it could be completely wrong in a week's time. So it's a bugbear for me. And yeah, okay, honestly speaking, I will cover any system that will get me, if a particular system that I'm not interested in will beat all of my other videos by a significant amount, you can be pretty sure I'm going to cover it, just because. Me too, it's memory lane. I'm sorry, what are you referring to there? Sorry, I, with all the problems with the video, I've got the delay. It's like a 20-second delay, so I'm not sure what you're talking about. But anyway, say it's like I will make a tutorial on anything legitimate, anything honest. I won't lie. I won't create tutorials that aren't true or that don't work. But I will create a tutorial on anything legitimate that will beat the other content on my channel, because at the end of the day, until everyone in the entire world who is interested in old systems has seen my channel, I still need to get more reach. So I will do anything to get that reach that is legitimate, which is to say why I'm doing these videos. The idea is that maybe people who just want to watch someone talk crap and play games will learn a little bit of coding, and I'll be banging on about coding so long they'll start to think, well, maybe I could give it a go as well. So I'll do anything like that, but the Spectrum Next is no longer bringing in the views, and it's still changing. And it's like, it's tough to love. It's tough to love when you're doing those two. You know, if you can be old and crappy, or you can be brand new and still changing. But if you're still not released, still changing your hardware, still problems with the emulators, and your documentation isn't great, and even if I make perfect documentation, it could be wrong tomorrow. It's a bit difficult, a bit difficult. But I'm looking at the X256. My last video was still pretty good on it. It's doing well, and the weird thing about the Phoenix, spoiling what I was about to say there, the weird thing about the X16 is when I released the X16 video, it got about 200 views in 48 hours, which is more than anything else on my channel has ever had, and that even up to 300 at one point. But not only that, it actually increased the views of my regular 6502. I'm forgetting my words. Sorry, it brought a lot of extra views to my regular 6502 videos, and so it wasn't just the fact that, hey, this new video is getting attention. It's actually, it's brought me a big new audience. It's actually brought people to the existing content. So even if the X16 completely changes its hardware platform and my current documentation is useless, the increase in viewers to my website, my channel, is not useless. So it's still a gain for my channel. It's still more people who are being taught things. So it's worth it in that sense, even if the documentation proves to be useless. But while the 6502 videos doubled or tripled in popularity because of the X16 video, the Z80 videos saw nothing. The Spectrum Next videos not only were hit and miss, but they brought no extra viewers to the Z80 videos. So again, it's like, well, it's not really driving new viewers to me. It didn't feel like, not long term, maybe short term. So I'm going to be phasing that out. So my nose is itching. So the Sprite video will be coming at some point when, as I say, when the emulators actually meet the documentation, assuming they don't change the documentation again. But after that, I'll probably put it on pause for a while, see what happens, see if the hardware even comes out for one thing, because as I say, it's still vaporware. And the Spectrum community after the whole ZX Vega fiasco. I hope the next isn't like that. I'm not saying I believe it is, but you know, it's the once bitten twice shy kind of thing. I know last time I went to their store at the start of the 2019 to see what was what and to see if I could pre-order one or what. It was talking about, oh well, we're currently fulfilling the backers expected 2018 or something. It mentioned 2018 like it was a future date, and it was like, yeah, you're not even updating forget your firmware, your website's not even accurate. And on a sales page as well, it's like, well, you know, it's not filling me with confidence here. If you just take the sales pages off if you're not even close to selling to the public. At the moment, it's like, well, you wonder if they ever will sell to the public. Anyway, this is substantially humiliating me, this game. So let's turn it off and let's try Chase HQ. I'm hoping Chase HQ will be a bit more technically interesting, because racing games usually are quite tricky. The old Vespertino thing, they always use graphical tricks to make the scrolling and colour switching and things. So Chase HQ for me was always the Amstrad CPC game. Very good on the Amstrad CPC, very, very good. It's one that everyone remembers, and for me, racing games are the best for the NES. I think, truth be told, they're the best for all systems. I think the NES is also very good at vertical shooters. And of course platformer, platformer's grief really. But yeah, I mean, okay, so nice big graphic there, that's nice. Oh, did you hear that? That was in Japanese. We're after a white sports car. Shiro sports car I heard there, so we're after a white sports car. I wasn't expecting the speech, but we got speech in Japanese. Hi. I think that was hi. Anyway. So yeah, look how smooth that is. That's really smooth. So okay. Just trying to work out the controls here. So yeah, we've got some very, very nice smooth scrolling here. So you've got the sky up there, and you've got this smooth scrolling track and trash cans. I don't remember the trash cans on the. So of course the way that everything is done here is we've got a tile map graphic for the track, and then they are moving. I can't pause. I wanted to pause to talk about it. So, oh. Was that a fake transparency effect? I've got a 30. I'm limiting to 30 frames a second. So whenever anything flickers, you're gonna see it messed up in some way. So I think that was probably flickering the two directions at 60 hertz, probably causing epileptic fits for everyone with the epilepsy issues. But I say that was how they often did transparency effects. Not moving. Okay, I'm just trying to work out the controls for the gears here. Okay, so we've got high and low gear. So what they do is they define the tile map as being this sort of track, and then they are moving the tile map as the lines of the screen draw to make the track sort of curve or at least move left and right. So when I'm moving left and right here and the track is moving with me, the tile map isn't probably being redrawn. What's actually happening is the offset is being changed while the screen is redrawing, and that's how they're able to make these incredibly fast, incredibly complex graphics on a game like this. Hit the wrong car there. And it doesn't look... I mean, it's perfectly decent, but it doesn't look quite as good as on the CPC version. They use Mode 0, and you had these bright flashing lights at the top of the screen, and it really looked really graphically spectacular. Whereas this, I mean, yeah, I say it's... I'm not trying to say it looks bad. It doesn't. It looks really... The animation's really smooth, but you know, the Amstrad had its limitations. But when the CRTC, which allowed those kind of same tricks of moving the graphical display during the redraw, came in, and when the colours really started to become important, the CPC really started to win. As I say, I think Turtles was better on the NES overall. I think it was an impressive effort on the CPC, but I think the NES one won it. Especially with the extra levels. I mean, adding extra levels is going really beyond the requirement. But, the bottom third of the screen is kind of slightly curved. I don't think that's supposed to be happening. I don't know whether that's my video capture device or if that's the hardware gradually rotting. It could be both. Anyway. Arkanoid controller. So it supports a rotary controller, does it? Okay. That's interesting. We'll someday we'll have a look at the Jaguar. I've got an Atari Jaguar over here. And Tempest 2000 is, of course, the game on the Jaguar to be played. And I made a rotary controller for the Jaguar. You can take a regular controller and you can wire up a rotary encoder into well, I put it in the bottom, but you can put it anywhere you want. And the game supports it. The author of Tempest 2000 was such a Tempest nut that they coded in support for a device that was... At the time, it didn't exist, and it was later released, but I think there were literally a run of 100 made or something crazy. It was so rare that it was... I don't even know if it was sold. It might have been given away as a prize or something, but as I say, it was super limited. And but it's really easy to make one. You just get a digital encoder with 3 pins, and you wire the 3 pins to a couple of the buttons on the joystick, and then you can add a switch to allow you to turn the rotary encoder on and off, because some of the stages the rotary encoder isn't really playable, so you really need it to be optional. So it's just how you can put a switch on as well, which is what I did. But Tempest 2000 is an incredible game, really impressive. But I have looked at, I've mentioned this before, but I have looked at the Jaguar as a system to cover in my tutorials, but the documentation's just horrid. So it's another one, maybe someday, not today though, not yet. When I've got nothing left to do maybe, or when I'm retired and I've got thousands of hours to spend doing nothing, but not yet, because it's just too complex and the documentation's too weak. And it's another of these systems that really most of the people coding are coding in C. So if I were to code it in assembly, I'd be going against the grain and find it very hard to get the help I needed. So it's a bit disappointing that the fire isn't yellow. It was a bit... I'm running out of time. No, I'm running out of time. CPC having more colours, you would have had some nice flames coming out the back. Not good enough. Not good enough. I'll go find some more games, I think. See what else we've got. sorry about that. Just selecting another few games. So I think we'll run this stream for about another 30 minutes, and then I'll sign off because I've got to get back to programming kind of thing. So it looks like Wi-Fi is winning then today. The Wi-Fi is winning the cabling wars. So maybe I'll just give up on wired altogether. The bandwidth here is as good as I've seen it. Wired isn't doing very well connection-wise, so wireless seems to be better, more reliable. So I don't know what that's all about. So what we got now then? So I got Top Gun. I thought that would be interesting because that's another one that's going to be. Oh no. I was thinking of Afterburner. Top Gun's. Is Top Gun any good? I was thinking of Afterburner. Afterburner's the one with crazy graphics. I got Rainbow Islands. This is gonna be me laughing at the NES because color limitations. How are you going to do 7 colored rainbows with 4 colors? You know. And then Space Invaders. I just thought it'd be fun to look at another really, really crude game and just technically crude game. Just again to say, you know. How many times has Space Invaders been re-released? How many times has it sold well? It's a very simple game. We'll play it first. We'll play Space Invaders first. Again, it's just making the point that, you know, if you've got a simple idea and you code it well, that's not to say that your game won't be incredibly successful and popular. I mean, ironically, these old simple games, and this is why the retro industry and why I might get copyright struck is becoming so popular now, is because it's almost easier to sell these simple games than it is to sell the very modern complex games, even though the modern complex games are very expensive to produce. It's the same with the movie industry. It's all getting a bit weird, isn't it? All the old stuff's coming back, and you're like, well, why are 10-year-olds, why are 15-year-olds and 17-year-olds going to see the new Terminator film when they weren't even alive when Terminator 2 came out? Just doesn't make how is releasing something to when your target audience is teenagers mostly. How is releasing something that's 30 years old? How does that make any sense? They probably shouldn't even know what it is, and even if they do, generally speaking, younger generations will shun the fashions of the older generations just because they want their own stuff. And it's like making an action movie out of Rampage. It's like, what the heck are you doing here? I hadn't even heard of Rampage until I came to Japan and got it on the Master System. It was like, it wasn't even a game I'd heard of. And you're getting a big action star to star in this, and you're trying to sell it to teenage audiences. It doesn't make any sense. But as I say, it just it seems very weird. But as I say, the point I'm making is just, you know, don't give up on the idea of a game. If you've got an idea of a game you want to make, or if you've got an idea for a program you're writing, don't give up on it just because it's too simple in quotes, because, you know, these simple games it's not just that these simple games sold well in the 90s and 80s. These simple games and these simple ideas are still selling now. They're releasing Tempest 4000, is it? What's it called, the new one? I can't even remember anymore. So say, and that's it's very graphically intensive, but the gameplay is no different from the original, really. So again, it's like you're selling a whole new generation the same old idea. I've heard it said of the people buying the Famicom Mini, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard it said of the people buying the Famicom Mini that they're actually all people who are too young to have actually grown up with these consoles. Which I find that hard to believe, but I can't remember who said it, maybe Larry Bundy Jr. or someone, but someone made the point that, well, in the UK, the NES wasn't that popular. Certainly I got mine in the early 90s when the Mario 3 Turtles 2 came out, but in the 80s and early 90s, really everyone was using systems like the Spectrum and the Amstrad CPC because they were so cheap. I mean, the hardware wasn't cheap, but the games were, you could buy a game for $1.99 or $2.99, whereas on the NES you were buying games for £50 or £40, and it was just like, well, you couldn't justify that kind of money. People weren't going to buy their kids a games console for what was probably £200 in the 80s, and then buy them games that are £40 when they could buy them an educationally viable computer for the £200 or the £250, and then buy the games for free. It just didn't happen. So in a lot of ways, it's the kind of, I guess it's this hipster thing maybe, that the people buying this thing are buying it because they think it's retro, whereas if they were buying the real retro stuff, I guess they'd be buying Amstrad CPC minis and the Spectrum Next. Although, I mean, they are to some extent. But the Spectrum Next isn't retro because it's got a 256 color screen mode and an 8 megahertz processor. It's like, what? And a Raspberry Pi bolted onto it. So nothing retro about that. But anyway, I got totally distracted earlier. I'm planning to start covering the Phoenix 256, which is another one conceptually similar to the Commando X16, but I have done some early work on it. I'm still struggling a little bit. I think the documentation is slightly less mature than the X16, but that's not to say that it's bad. There's an emulator. I did find a bug in the emulator processor, which certainly suggests that it's not as far on yet, because I wouldn't have expected for it to be me who found that bug, because it was a major bug. It was the zero flag wasn't being set when you incremented a 0-page entry, which basically means you couldn't compile. There was no way you would be able to compile any kind of remotely complex program on that processor, on that emulator, and have it work if there was such a large limitation in the processor. So, but the main problem I'm having isn't that. It's actually the machine is based on the 65816, the 16-bit processor. Is this an official release? Yes, it's got a Taito logo on the on this. Can you see that? There's a Taito logo just there. So yes, it's an official one. Is that rare? I don't know. I'll tell you an ironic thing. There's a Super Nintendo version as well, and it's awful. It's barely any better than this. It might even be worse. It's like, you're looking at it like, I think it's got like black and white, the real original one, and then it's got like the Plus version in colour. And you're just looking at it like, this isn't acceptable for a Super Nintendo game. This is, the Super Nintendo should be capable of far more than this. Just put it in perspective. I've got the Super Space Invaders, which I think is a really nice game, and that's on the Master System. So the Super Nintendo is not only getting beaten by the Master System, it's doing it intentionally. I mean, they just didn't try. And it's like, you can't charge proper money. It's okay if this is a free introduction cartridge or something, but you can't release this as a commercial game on a 16-bit console that's capable of 3D effects, like the Mode 7, I mean. It's just not it's not acceptable. I mean, I'm all for retro, and releasing games with the classic version included as a bonus, fine, go ahead, do that, that's brilliant. But to release it with no real extra features over the original on such an advanced machine is just, it's just taking advantage of the customer base. They kind of did the same thing with, they released it on the Game Boy Color, and I think they released Pac-Man, I think, on the Game Boy Color, and I think they may have released it on the other one, the Neo Geo Pocket. Now, in some ways, that's slightly more justifiable because they weren't that powerful machines, I mean, they still could manage more, but they couldn't manage much more, I think is the truth of it. But as I say, again, as I've said, scratching my nose, getting killed there. As I said before, releasing a game of this standard on the NES, I think is reasonably, it's perfectly acceptable, really. I mean, it's not as good as Mario 3, but it's a fun game. It's a game that is reasonable, is taking some advantage of the hardware capabilities in the sense it's in colour. It's got a lot of moving objects, even though there's not really enough sprites to do that. So, you know, they're putting some effort in. But I'd say the Super Nintendo version wasn't putting any effort in at all. And you know, again, it's like, well, if you're releasing it on the Game Boy Color, if you're releasing Pac-Man on the Game Boy Color, I'd kind of like there to be a Pac-Man Plus or something with better sprites or something. I don't think the Game Boy Color version had anything extra. I think it was just Pac-Man. So let's just reset. Does this have any other options? 1 or 2 player. I was just wondering if it had the option to switch to black and white mode or something, just as a sort of like a nostalgic thing. Because as I say, my understanding is that there were, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm getting mixed up. I was thinking that Space Invaders was black and white, and Space Invaders Plus was colour. But maybe I'm wrong, and they were both the same thing, because maybe it was probably just a colour filter over the screen, wasn't it? So maybe there wasn't. Maybe there was no Space Invaders Plus, or maybe it's something else. I'm not sure. I mean, just to reiterate, this is way before my time. I never saw this I've never seen this in a real arcade in my life. I can't say there hasn't been an arcade I've been in that had it, but I've never seen it in an arcade. Never played it in an arcade. No one I knew ever talked about playing this in an arcade. You know, my childhood, I grew up with the sort of Operation Wolf, Turtles, the X-Men game, things like that. Those were the arcade. Street Fighter 2, of course, when I was in my teens. Those were the games that I actually grew up with being around me in the arcades. So this is before my time really for being an arcade release. But I got the Super. I apologise for playing so awfully badly, but I'm more focusing on talking than playing. The Super Space Invaders I got for the PC. I got it cheap. It was for sale for like about $15 or something on 2 double density floppy disks, I think it was. And the thing that was quite impressive about it for the time, the DOS version, was it had music. It had beeper music. I think it actually supported FM MIDI as well, but it had this quite snazzy little introduction video, like an animation that used up, I think, an entire floppy disk, which I always a lot of respect for when people did that. It was quite fun when they went to such extents with the introduction that they ended up using half the disk space for it. But it had the same soundtrack in beeper sounds, and it sounded fairly decent. They did a decent job of it. So that was, I think, that was one that I remember. Sort of, I think I was there was a sort of PC versus Amiga competition, or some kind of random schoolyard argument type of thing going on, and that was one that I'd shown that they were kind of amazed by, because it had this snazzy animation and it had sound which, without your AdLib sound chip or without your Sound Blaster, the PC rarely made even a beep. In all honesty, they used to just not bother at all. And the game didn't have music, it was just beeps like this, but that was perfectly acceptable because that was kind of what even people expected from that game. But as I say, the introduction really wowed people. I think that was one of it's one game that I really remember the introduction of. June 2000, of course, was the other big one. That was like cinematic at the time. And then the other one, of course, that really wowed people was The Seventh Guest, which is why I'm doing it for the Halloween special. That one was really wowed people. So that's certainly one that I don't know if anyone remembers it now, but everyone certainly remembered it in the early 90s. It's weird because sort of talking to people my age, they don't seem to remember it anymore. I don't quite know why. Because I say, it's like, maybe it was just, maybe there were the geeky kids who all remembered it and everyone else didn't. It could just be that. But the impression I sort of had at the time, and still to some extent have now, is that it was really, it wowed non-gamers because it, as I say, Seventh Guest was so technically impressive for the time. But and those days were the real transition, where for a time, and it's always changing, but for a time, the NES and the Super Nintendo took over from the Amstrad CPC and the Amiga, basically. And then because they were just able to do so much more technically out of the box. But then when Wolfenstein 3D, I think, was the big changeover. Wolfenstein 3D came out, and all of a sudden the consoles couldn't compete. I mean, if you've played Wolfenstein 3D on the blooming SNES, the graphics are terrible. And also they censored it down because they couldn't have the dogs, so they changed them to rats, because dogs are people too, and rats can just go to hell and die, I guess. I mean, it's not me saying that, but that seemed to be their mentality. So personally, I don't wish it ill on either, but as I say, they were actually changing the game for censorship reasons. And so again, that was the sort of thing with Street Fighter. Street Fighter 2 was the console beat 'em up, but the PC gamers, they were all on Mortal Kombat, and part of that was, firstly, Mortal Kombat was in some way, I think it was a lot faster. It was actually outperforming the Street Fighter 2 at least, maybe not Turbo, but Street Fighter 2 it was. And also it had the gore and the realistic graphics. And when Mortal Kombat came out on the SNES, they were censoring it down. So it was both a technical and a artistic thing that eventually the PC started to take over again, with your Doom and your Rise of the Triad was the one I remember back then. It was crazy violence, and there was a sort of the Phantasmagorias, Harvester. There was a big rush around that time for not just technical supremacy, but also artistic extremism, shall we say, where they were trying to rush to make the most technically advanced games they could, and also the most violent or dark or adult games they could, because these were the sort of dimensions that were new to the viewing audience. Because, as I say, the game console could not play The Seventh Guest. You could not do it. I mean, Phantasmagoria came on 6 CDs. I mean, it was even pushing CD to the limit. It was ridiculous, but they did. And as I say, even if they'd released, even if Phantasmagoria was being targeted for the Genesis, the content would have probably been rejected for it, because, as I say, it was just too extreme, and it was intentional. It wasn't accidental. They were intentionally being edgy. So as I say, then the consoles really took over. The PC took over from the console throughout the N64 kind of era, in my opinion, anyway. And then when the PlayStation 2 came out, it started to swing back again, because I think basically the graphics cards were getting too expensive, and the removal of buying a PS2 meant you had no compatibility problems. You didn't have to worry about buying a new graphics card every 6 months, which you did have to do it sometimes. I bought a £300 graphics card for Half-Life 2. I don't know if you remember, but they lied about the release date. They said it was going to come out in a month, and it didn't, because they hadn't finished it. And I bought the graphics card before it came out at the original date, and it came with a voucher to get the game free when it finally came out, which it didn't for about 3 years. And then by that time I'd got another new graphics card since then. So as I say, you were in some cases literally buying £300 graphics cards, and they were lasting you 1 to 2 years. So the PS2 and was it the PS2 still then? But anyway, the PS2 and the PS3 were starting to look very good back then. Nowadays, I can't comment. I'm out of it all now. I don't. As I've said before, I only buy DRM-free games. I'm perfectly happy to buy games on CD, but I expect the game on the CD or DVD. But I expect the game on the CD to actually work. If the game on the CD doesn't work because it's not finished, or it needs online activation, or it's so buggy it doesn't play properly and you have to download a 40 gig first day patch, I'm not buying it. So I've just completely abandoned the PS4 generation and the Xbox, whatever it is, Xbox One or Xbone or whatever they call it. No, I just don't care anymore. So I've bought a Switch, but I don't play it. It's still cartridge based. It still doesn't need online activation. So I play this. I've got a Switch, but I played Splatoon a bit, but I don't have time to. As you can see, I don't have time to get good. So I just bought it just to keep a finger in the game, just to feel like I'm remotely related to the current generation of consoles. It's a nicely designed machine as well. Nintendo at the moment are the better one of them all for supporting the gaming public, but only barely, because I'm sure they're on and off with the old YouTubers, whether they're trying to take their money. They were taking some of the YouTubers' money a couple of years ago. This video would probably be okay because I'm talking the whole time, but if they deemed that too much of the content was gameplay and too little was talking, they were taking the money from the stream, almost all of it. They were taking like 80% or 70%. It was the majority, and doesn't make much money doing this anyway. And unsurprisingly, that annoyed a few of the viewers, a few of the content creators. Now, I will say I think that is justified if you're doing full playthroughs with no commentary, because I've Freudian slip there, I've watched entire playthroughs of games that I would have been interested in playing, but I simply can't be bothered to play them, or don't own them and aren't willing to buy them. So, arguably speaking, I have watched playthroughs of games rather than buy the game. But the ones with reasonable amounts of commentary, that's absurd. If someone plays a game halfway through and talks a bit through it, no one's going to watch that instead of playing the game. You're watching that for them. No one's watching this rather than play Space Invaders, because I'm terrible at it. If they're watching it because they want to hear what someone has to say, what they think of the game or what they think about life in general. That's why people are watching these streams. It's not for the game. So, as I say, it was a bit absurd, but my understanding is they've now abandoned that because hopefully they saw sense, but who knows? I mean, they're constantly changing. And in some cases, they've been going quite hard on the people making remakes of their games and fan versions. In some cases, I think it's justified, and in some cases, I think it isn't. It's going to be a controversial take, but I think it was justified with regards to the Commodore 64 port of the Super Mario NES game, because as far as I can tell, because that actually had the same bugs and the same quirks as the original, I'm pretty sure that was an emulation or a reassembly. It wasn't a new game that used some assets from the original. So I would say that was justified, because at the end of the day, people might buy that, people might download that for free instead of buying a new Super Mario game on their phone or whatever. But on the other side, there was that, what was it called? The No Mario Sky, which was obvious parody, and it really just used the Mario sprite. And they threatened them, and they changed it to No DOM Sky or no DCMA Sky or something. And they changed it to a Space Sky, which, I say, it's like, well, yeah, okay, I'm glad you did that, because it was on. Your game should have been out there, and it felt that was obvious parody to me. But equally, I think there's a how can I word this? I think it's only appropriate that there are some difficulties with regard to using a large-scale IP in amateur games, because honestly, me trying to market Chibi Akumas, which is basically a kind of Death Smiles remake or parody or whatever, if I'd have called my game Death Smiles and I'd have just ripped the sprites off Death Smiles and tried to recreate the bosses from Death Smiles, I would have got all of the Death Smiles marketing for free just because I was using their name. And I would have saved all of the effort of creating graphics just because I'd ripped off their graphics. And I wouldn't have had to think of music because I could have ripped off their music. And I wouldn't have had to, you get the point. So by trying to create my own IP, I was actually at a disadvantage, and someone who hadn't and had just ripped off Death Smiles would have had all those advantages out of the box. And I think that there's a difficulty, I think it's quite difficult in the retro community at the moment, as an amateur developer, developing your own game that doesn't shamelessly rip off someone else's game, let's call it that, because no one's going to care about your game. No one's going to promote you, and everyone's just going to look the other way. I mean, if Batman Group could have called their pinball game VG Pinball, and they could have had almost the same game with almost the same graphics and almost the same gameplay, and they'd have got half the marketing or 10% of the marketing, because no one would have paid any attention to it, because the whole point, the whole reason they got all the attention was because it was a port of an Amiga game, and it's how accurate is it to this Amiga game. And the unfortunate effect of that is they can't sell it, because they can't get the IP licenses approved, because it's someone else's game essentially. And so say I can understand it now. The good thing is they've obviously changed now, because now they're doing the Vespertino thing, and the Vespertino is looking like being massively successful purely on technical merit, which is amazing. Great. I'm very happy for them, and I'm pleasantly surprised that even non-Amstrad communities are willing to actually reward technical merit, because as I say, in most cases, you know, we just live in a clickbait society, don't we? Technical merit doesn't mean squat anymore. It's far easier to just virtue signal your way to sales, really, isn't it? So yeah, anyway, Space Invaders, nice little game. Very simple there. I assume the background, the enemies moving across the screen are probably all done with tiles. There seem to be too many of them for my eye for it to be sprites. The players' sprites and the bullets, I'm sure, are sprites. So I was too busy gibbering on, not busy talking about the technicals of that game. If anyone has any particular NES games they want me to play, speak up. Not the Famicom disk system, because I'll be doing that another time, but I've got a few over there. I'm just playing a few I picked out that I thought would be quite fun. So as I say, Rainbow Islands, so palette switching there to try and make it look like a rainbow, because they can't get enough colours on the screen. They've kind of designed that title wrong, because if you look at the corner of the A, part of the A is changing colour with the I. They've really designed that quite badly. They should have done better than that. With Chibi Akuma's, when I was doing the palette switching of the title screen, I tried to design the title screen around the colours. Now, this is a game, I think that the NES version is actually worse than the Amstrad CPC. I think the CPC really knocked it out of the park here. So they've decided to use blue, yellow and red there for their rainbow. It looks good. From my memory, that looks a lot better than the Commodore 64 version. So, I mean, again, you got the same kind of thing as usual. So we've got the backgrounds all done with tiles. All the enemies here are sprites. The rainbows are obviously sprites because they're able to overlap the tile map here. The power-ups, they're all tiles, obviously. It's just you've just got to design within your limitations here. That screen's very boring. Family Basic, yes I am. I've got that. I'm going to do a special episode for that. Yes, it'll probably be after Halloween. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do like a 3-hour stream or a 2-hour stream just on Family Basic, and so I'll have the manual under my camera, and we'll be reading through it and trying to work out what we can knock together in 3 hours. But yes, that's what I want to make into more of a what can be achieved on a system you've never programmed before with an instruction manual in Japanese, I guess. It could be interesting. So yes, I do want to do Family Basic, but I want to do more of it. I want to do it as a proper episode. If for no other reason, I'll have to be rummaging around in the cupboard to find the keyboard, because I don't know where it is. It's in a box, probably buried under a Master System or something. All the big stuff all has to stay in boxes in the cupboard because of space limitations. My apartment is relatively large, but compared to what you hear about Japan, but it's not large. It's not. I don't live in some massive house or anything. It's just better than some people have it. So, the real question you should be asking yourself is, how are they going to do the boss battle? Because if you know this game, the boss battle is a giant spider. I can't remember. So as I say, it's like again, it's how would you define? if you were writing this game, how would you make a character that's too big for your hardware? They basically got a couple of choices. They could either use the tile map to create the spider and move the tile map around, or they could use the sprites and it's going to flicker a lot, or they could shrink the character like they did with, in a lot of cases with Altered Beast. They could just change the boss battle in sufficiently to make it more viable. I don't know why you kind of have this. There's this kind of paging thing where it scrolls for a while and then you kind of get to a stage and it seems to completely redraw the screen. I don't remember the Amstrad CPC version doing that. But as I say, in general, I would say the CPC version was better than this. You saw there the rainbows flickering. You can see bits disappearing maybe there. That's sprite limitations, of course. They're out of sprites, so things are starting to flicker. There's nothing they can do about that on this system. Again, the Amstrad CPC, no hardware sprites, so everything's drawn in software, means no hardware limitations. This was one of the games that was done very well on the CPC, partially because it's vertically scrolling. The CPC was very good at vertical scrolling, very bad at horizontal scrolling, so I would guess they were using some kind of hardware scroll. Maybe wrong. I haven't gone into the code or anything. Now, this was one of these games where there was some kind of gotcha at the end of the game, wasn't there, to annoy the arcade players. I think you have to get big diamonds or something, and if you don't, it tells you you deserve to be punished and spend more of your money or some nonsense. I also like the rather tenuous link. When you kill the enemies, they're turning into the... I think they're turning into the characters from the Bubble Bobble game, because this is officially Bubble Bobble 2, and I don't think that was a scam, because sometimes, like with Vindicator Green Beret 2, they just slap the title onto a finished game after the fact. But this one, I would be surprised if that was the case. And I think, in all honesty, I think the characters, these cherub-like cute characters here, I think they were actually what the characters looked like in the introduction of Bubble Bobble before they were turned into monsters. So as I say, I'm taking it as sort of canon that it really is a sequel to Bubble Bobble, although I found it a bit daft that they then made Power Soul Stars have them in the same form as this again and didn't go back, didn't change to a third form or anything. So I don't know. I like Bubble Bobble quite a lot. It's mostly a nostalgia thing, I think. Really, I sort of remember playing it with one of my friends after school, kind of thing. So that's probably most of the reason I like Bubble Bobble. Rainbow Islands, I think Rainbow Islands has a certain charm to it, more than New Zealand Story. I find New Zealand Story, the diversity of weapons I found a little bit confusing, whereas this has a much more simple vibe to it. So you've got more focus, maybe a more sort of consistent style, whereas in Rainbow Islands you're firing arrows or you're throwing bombs and floating around on balloons and things, whereas there's none of that in this. You're always just using the rainbows. So maybe you get a lightning bolt in this at some point, like in Bubble Bobble. But anyway, I never got into Power Soul Stars. I do have it. I have it for the PC Engine, but I've never really found it too exciting. As I said before, Liquid Kids, Mizupaku Daiboken, that one's more interesting to me, because that's that, as I said, it's like a cross between New Zealand Story and Bubble Bobble. You've got this thing of throwing bubbles at people. Although the bubbles are full of water, so I'm just getting distracted here. But that was never branded as a sequel to Bubble Bobble. And in all honesty, it could have been, because as I say, you've got the bubble theme. You've got they're not dragons now; they're water tapir, but whatever. As I say, they've still got the same kind of style to it. It felt more like a sequel to Bubble Bobble than really Power Cell Stars did. But I mean, you know, there's nothing against Power Cell Stars. There is some. I played some really awful sequel, some Bubble Bobble game for the DS, I think it was. No, it was the. I think it was even worse. I think it was the PSP, and they'd redrawn the characters, and they got like trumpets that blew bubbles or something. They like leprechaun hats, and they didn't look anything like the original characters, and it was all like pre-rendered 3D kind of style or something nasty, and it was just like, well, this looks nothing like the original. The gameplay mechanics don't feel like the original, and the nostalgia people aren't going to like this, and I don't like what's new either. I just don't get why use the title if you're not banking on nostalgia. Now, to be fair to it, it did have the original Bubble Bobble. Here we go. This is interesting. So we've got our giant spider here. Okay. So, I think they've done something quite clever here. Cleverer than me dying there. Okay. Super Kumo. Nah. Kumo is spider. NGAH isn't proper Japanese. I don't know what on earth that's all about. Now, do you see what's going on here? Look at the bottom right hand screen. You notice how the tiles are flickering there, and the rainbows are flickering. Now, the ground is solid, and there's the big spider sprite. What they've done here, this is quite clever. The spider is using the tile map as a giant sprite, and the ground is the tile map, so they're obviously repositioning the tile map during the screen redraw. Or maybe they're doing a palette switch or something during the screen redraw for the brown ground. And then the rainbows, I'm a sprite, the rainbows are sprites, and the blocks aren't tiles, they're sprites. So they're using sprites for everything except for the spider and probably the ground, which is either a palette switch or tiles. So that's how they've got around the limit of the sprites being too small for them to draw their spider. So that's clever. I couldn't remember what they did. I knew they did something and they were a bit tricky about it. But as I say, anytime you've got to get a character of that kind of scale onto the screen, you're gonna have to be clever. You're gonna have to come up with either a redesign of the character, or if you're really smart, a way of working within the hardware's limitations to make it look like the hardware can do things that it can't. And for me, that's what I like to see. As I say, that was the whole point of Chibi Akumas, was to try and get more colours onto the screen via changing the colour halfway through the screen than the screen mode could do. So yeah, as I say, I really like to see that kind of thing. And that worked pretty well. It was a bit flickery, but I can't think of a better way of doing it, and it wasn't unpleasant. The triple rainbow power up is kind of hitting the limitations of the sprite hardware a little bit here. Oh, I've only got double. You're getting worse than with triple. This is one of those times where if you were writing a new game for the NES, you wouldn't want to have an attack that fires large amounts of things horizontally, because the sprite limit is horizontal. So you'd want to have a vertical attack, or an attack that fires bullets, or something that doesn't appear very big or very long. So again, if you're writing for only one system, if you're writing a new game for one system, design within the limitations of the system in mind, because otherwise you might write something that doesn't necessarily work so well. But I was being unfair to this. I still think this game could be better if it had chibi Akumas. I don't know about that. I mean, I think the only thing I'd say with this is I think the CPC version was better, just because of the better colours. And as I say, the spider, there was no flickering, but the graphics were still... I mean, they've done a decent job of working within the limitations of the hardware. You know, I'm sure the developer wasn't told, what system do you want to develop this game for? Oh, well, I'll take the NES. They were probably told, we want you to develop for the NES. Get on with it. Develop this game for the NES. So they didn't get to the choice of which game to develop. They just were told to develop it. So as I say, it's a nice way. They've done an okay attempt at it. I'm enjoying it. It's got nice music. Now, I suppose the real question is, which version of the music's this? You probably know this, but there was a... this is the original. There was a big thing. They were sued by whoever owns Somewhere Over the Rainbow. It must be... is it Disney who owns Somewhere Over the Rainbow? Anyway, they were sued because the theme is quite obviously based on Somewhere Over the Rainbow. They tried to deny it, but it obviously is. But... you would have thought it would come into some parody argument, but anyway, some of the versions have a slightly different theme where it doesn't sound anything like it's that part. It sounds like Somewhere Over the Rainbow, that part does, but the other version doesn't have that bit. It's completely different. They made it very, very different, so they couldn't be accused again. But this is obviously the original one. I think that was unfair, you know, to be sued over really just a tiny, tiny section of audio like that. It just seems like, well, that would count in my mind as parody. The rest of the song is nothing like it at all. The helicopter's very small. I think that's bigger on the CPC. Go away, leave me alone. That's something you do notice on the YouTube rules. Basically, you're allowed to do parody, and fair use allows parody, and it allows small clips of things for if they're repurposed. So, for example, I'm playing this game and I'm talking, and the reason you're following my channel is because I'm talking. So I'm repurposing the gameplay as a source of conversation and of programming advice. That's my intention. You know, I might not be doing a very good job of it, but that's the intention. So that's what I'm doing here, and that would be considered, one would hope, to be fair use. And equally, you know, if I went and got a bunch of clips of movies and chopped them together to make some kind of comedy video or a fake trailer or whatever, anything that was transformative, i.e. altering the original purpose, that would also be considered fair use. And even 5-minute clips of videos are considered fair use, which is why you'll often see these channels that just upload 5-minute clips of Family Guy, you know, or something like that. It's because they can justify it within the fair use guidelines. But music doesn't have it. Apparently, according to what I heard the other day, if I hum the theme of a song that is copyrighted, I could even get copyright struck for just the humming. So, well, surely that's definitely transformative, because I might not even be in tune, for starters. And yeah, it's like, oh, there's no lyrics, no one's going to rip off me humming and put it on their MP3 player. It's obviously not proper copyright breach, but YouTube will copyright strike you for that. Which is why I'm running a second channel and I only got 70 viewers, 70 subs, because I'm not willing to put this on my main channel and jeopardise my main channel when the rules are so draconian when it comes to in-game music and things. And also, that's the reason that a lot of YouTubers, when you're watching their gameplay videos, their music is so low you can't hear anything in the game. It's because that's the only way they can be sure they're going to keep their channel and not either lose their channel or lose their income. So I can't even tell what volume this is. It's pretty quiet. It's pretty quiet, but I can hear it. Sorry, one earphone's plugged directly into my PC and the other's plugged into my mobile phone streaming it. So this is, I think, slightly louder. Yeah, this is slightly louder than I think the game streamers do it. Yeah, I do try and tell people, Jimmy, the problems I come across in YouTube, because for me, one of the things I always find very interesting is other people who use YouTube who tell people what it's like, because firstly, you know, if you're trying to get started, you know, even simple things like setting up the streaming software can be daunting. But also, even if you're not interested, you want to know what it's like just for curiosity, or just to consider whether this is something you want to do yourself. You know, because if your plan is to play, you know, non-stop Michael Jackson games all day and all your videos get copyright struck and you can't make any money, then you know you don't want to. You want to reconsider that before you start. You want to have an idea that's valid. And as I say, my idea on this channel is not to get money from it. It's to try and attract a different audience that might be intimidated by the technical videos, but to still try and give a little bit of technical content. But as I say, at the end of the day, if the technical content is me explaining my USB problems and explaining what YouTube's like, then if that's the advice I've got to give, then I'll give it. But I saw one the other day from, I think it was called SC Review or something. It's not a channel I watch. I only clicked on it because of the title. But he made a video that apparently got 1.6 million views, and he made $1,600 on that video. And that's consistent with what I've heard. Basically, you need to get 1,000 views to make $1 in advertising revenue, which is a very big one to consider. Now, my channel, I think my top video has had about 6,000 views, but that's just one. My Z80 video and my 6502 video, I think, have made 6 to 10,000 views or something, but they are by massively large amounts the most popular video on my channel. Most of my videos get a few hundred views in their entire life, so you know they're making like 40 cents. Now here we go, we got another boss here. What's going on? Okay, I can't see the screen. I think I know what's going on here. Okay. Right, I'll explain what happened there, because I can guess. You remember how I said before there was a problem with the number of sprites on screen and how they had to trick it to make the big sprite appear? Well, I think that one was even harder. And so they've done something very crazy where they're remapping the screen multiple times during the draw, and that remapping function, maybe they're using the tile map in two places, one's for the sprite at the top and one's for the tiles at the bottom, or maybe they're using the sprites alternate frames or something crazy like that, maybe flickering everything 60 Hertz. But whatever they've done has confused my analog box. It can't cope, and so it's just completely vegged out. So anyway. So yeah, we're going to have to give up on this game because I'm never going to get past that if I can't see it. But I thought that's quite interesting. And as I say, they're obviously using a lot of different tricks for the boss battles. If I get bored one day, I'll play that on an emulator, and I'll have a look at how they do all of the bosses, because maybe there's some even crazier ones later on, and maybe they've got some clever tricks up their sleeve. Let's say that was quite pleasantly surprised by that. So last but by all means least, Top Gun Dual Fighters, which I think is a cute way of calling it Top Gun 2. This isn't the one that the Angry Video Game Nerd played, but it's almost identical. I can't remember what it looks like though. It's been a long time. So yeah, anyway, so basically, it sounds like from my point of view and from anyone's point of view, if you're a monetized YouTube channel which needs 1,000 subs, you will get $1 per view. And that Psy guy with his Dagnam style horse dancing video, he got a billion views, and he got $1 million for that. He made $1 million on the one video, which fair play to. I'm actually pleasantly surprised, because I was kind of worried that YouTube it was just going to be, we'll give you $50 and go away kind of thing. So it was good that he got so much recognition for what was an impossibly popular video. But anyway. So as I say, that's the kind of economics of it. But as I say, this channel, I can't monetize this channel because I've only got 70 subs. Even if I could monetize it, I suspect it would be at risk all of the time, just because of the regulations on copyright and the games. And do I really want to mute Rainbow Islands, or do I want to give half the money of the video to Disney because they own Somewhere Over the Rainbow? Well, just becomes, what's the point, doesn't it? But I mean, full disclosure, I have to point out I make about $140 on Patreon a month. That's where there's two ways of making money on YouTube for a small to medium sliced creator like myself. One is through Patreon donations, and one is through live stream. What's it called? Super chats. It's really the only chance you've got of making any money on YouTube anymore. If you're not getting like 1 million subs or something. So that's kind of the economics of it these days. But the trouble is, of course, it could all change at any time. There was some risk of the super chats because there was some people were making a joke by putting a number with this is another thing, you can't use certain words on YouTube anymore. The losers in World War II, I've heard it called that, let's put it that way. They were using numbers that were a reference to that as a joke, and they were making super chats of that amount as a joke, and the newspapers decided to make a big thing of it. And then for a while I was wondering if super chats were going to end as well, and if that happened, then a lot of YouTubers would be unable to make enough money to actually make ends meet at all. And I say that's only people who are actually doing it as a living, because I'd be crazy to try and do it as a living, because there's just not enough money left in it at a moderate level, and the higher the level up you go, the more it starts costing you, because if you're trying to produce 3 videos a day, which the algorithm often likes, well, you're probably going to have to pay editors and people to do the work for you. I say it's like it just becomes harder. It becomes harder the more views you get and things, because if you need to make the money, you need to make the videos, and if you make the videos, you may need to hire people, which means you need more money. Now, this is quite clever. So, what have we got going on here then? Well, I would guess that the colours there, I would guess that's palette switching, so that blue scrolling effect. Yeah, that's how YouTube works now. As I say, the trouble is, even if that's how it works today, it could change tomorrow. So, these people doing it as a career, I think they're, well, unless they're making enormous amounts of money now, I think they're making a mistake, because you can't rely on it long term. There was that Octavius lady, she had a copyright strike problem and she's deleted all her videos, and it was just like, well, I feel for you. I'd be upset if my entire channel was deleted, but I am prepared for that. I'm aware that could happen any day, and I'm not talking about this one, I'm talking about my main channel. It could happen at any time, and there's nothing I can do about it, because as I said before, YouTube could just change the rules. They could just decide that it's not worth the legal risk to them of small creators like myself, so just delete all their videos. They could do it. I hope they won't, but they could. So, I've got all the videos I upload to YouTube, of course I keep on external hard drives, and I've got backups of them, and also I've now set up my main channel to back up all of the videos to seems to be, is it glitching? It's glitching out there again, I think. Unless that's just more analog problems. I BitChute, I back up all my tutorial videos to BitChute, and I keep them all offline as well, just in case I had to upload them all to somewhere else, just because, again, you can't rely on it. But anyway, we'll discuss, enough talk about that, we'll discuss what's going on here. So that's quite clever. You've got that scrolling part, and you've got these characters at the side there. I would guess the scrolling up of the plane, I would guess that's the tile map, and I would assume everything else on the screen there was sprites to affect a second layer. That's a common thing they do. They like in the last one, they will use the sprites for the stationary bit, and they will use the layer for the large moving bit. But anyway, in game, we got palette switching to make the movement effect. The tilting of the landscape, that's going to be the tile maps just being changed. They could be recalculating that on the fly, or they could have tiles. They could just be basically showing predefined tile maps just to fake the effect. Difficult to tell. It's not scrolling very smoothly though, so that'll all be pre-rendered. That's a layering effect where they're moving the tile map at different layers to make it look like a parallax. Quite effective. And was that speech there? I can't see anything. What's going on? Something's glitching out my capture card again. I don't know if it's the gameplay or if it's just overheating or something. Oh, it's okay here. So anyway, so I would expect the gradient, when I'm tilting, it's only tilting by 3 different options there, which isn't very good. So I think that that's a pre-rendered tile map, and they're switching between 3 options for the different tilts. The colour changing is affecting the movement, and then all of the cloud kind of things that are flying around there, and the bullets and the planes, they'll all be sprites, obviously. And the bottom half of the screen will be tile map as well. So there'll be, yeah. You can see a couple of glitchy pixels on the right-hand side of the blue tile map there, in the middle. I think they're switching the tile map to a different area of memory for the fixed bottom compared to the moving top. As I say, they'll be switching the moving top around a little bit depending on what they're actually showing. But as soon as I go too high up, everything locks up. I don't know why. I don't know what it's supposed to be showing. Weird. This kind of feels like a poor man's afterburner. So I'm not going to play this. Anyway, let's turn this off. Well, let's finish off on Kira Kira Star, which is a remake, or not remake, a new game, a new self-created, it's not a port or anything, game for the Famicom that came out a couple of years ago. It's by Columbus Circle. You can buy it from Amazon Japan. You may buy it from the West as well, I'm sure you can. So this is a nice little game, and totally new IP. It's quite a simple game, it's quite fun though. One problem I did have with it is this is the only Famicom I own that it works on, because of the law in Japan with regards to copy protection circumvention, which frankly leaves me staggered that I was able to buy this thing, because I would have thought that would be well within it. Maybe they've given up trying, but you couldn't buy mod chips for the Sega Saturn a couple of years ago, because it was like, oh, that's copy protection. It's like, Sega Saturn isn't made anymore. Sega Saturn's very, very old. It's like hardware preservation, you know. But it doesn't matter. They don't care. So even if you're making a new game for obsolete hardware, you can't bypass the copy protection of the old hardware because of Japanese law. Yeah, the water was slightly ugly, wasn't it? So yeah, anyway. So generally speaking, the only thing you can play this game on is a clone Famicom that doesn't have the copy protection chip. But for whatever reason, it works on this one. Now, I don't know if it's the case that this one is so old that it doesn't have the copy protection chip, or if the copy protection chip has just failed in this one. It's so old it's possible. But anyway, it worked fine in this one, but all of my other Famicoms, it doesn't work on. I don't know about the Famicom 2. There was a second generation Famicom, which is, it looks a bit like a cross between the Super Nintendo and this. It's the kind of, it's small and flat and kind of uses the American colours, but it doesn't look like the UK US Nintendo NES. But I don't have one, so I can't test it. They're not cheap. They're not expensive. They're at about $80, but they're not cheap. But whether they have the copy protection or not, I don't know. But anyway, this game works fine on it. So that's why I use this one, even though it's all horrible and ugly. So this is a very simple game. All we have to do is jump around and grab stars. So we've got some fake parallax going on here. We've got some nice music. The colours change and there's a few different backgrounds. But again, this is what I would think. Yes, it's a homebrew game, if you could call it that. The guy who made it is I don't know if it's his job or if it's still hobby level, but it's the same guy who did 8-bit Music Power, and there was this big Mado. It was called Madagatari. It was like a festival for the anime Madomagi, that anime, and he did there was like a NES display on it. And I just assumed it was just a mock-up, but apparently he did the graphics for that as well. So he's obviously quite well known to get like a contract like that. So I would, as I say, I'm not sure to what extent it's amateur and what extent it's professional, but it's, as I say, it's very, very recently released, and that's why it can't do the proper copy protection. But as I say, this is, I mean, I think honestly, I would say going back to the Vespertino thing, I think it's absurd for an amateur to try and attempt that kind of thing. This probably made money. I'm sure it made money. I don't know if the person could earn a living off it, but this was commercially viable for success-wise. And if you look at it, it's a very, very simple game. You've got a character that jumps around the screen. You've got a repeating scrolling background. You've got a few stars. You're not really pushing any of the limits of the NES here. The gameplay doesn't get any better to my knowledge. So it's a fun, simple little game that's really little more than it's more like a puzzle game than a platformer, isn't it? But as I say, this is kind of what I think an amateur should be aiming for, as something that's realistic. You don't want to be, you shouldn't be spending your entire life debugging your game or trying to do something that no one's ever done before on the system, because if no one could be bothered to do it when there was money in it, there's not really any now. So yeah, so this is I think this is really nice. So the backgrounds of, I don't know who drew them. I guess that's I'm pretty sure that's a professional pixel artist who's drawn that. So I didn't get enough stars, so I'm now all upset. So yeah, as I say, it's simple but it's effective. There's I think there's something like 4 backgrounds and half a dozen music tracks, and the colours change so that, it's using the same background again, but you can't tell because it all looks kind of different because of the new colour scheme. I think both fire buttons just jump in the same way, but I think you can do like, I'm trying to remember, there's some kind of like super jump to make you jump higher, and I can't remember how you do it. You have to get used to the patterns and be kind of waiting for them, because there's spots where you'll get all of the stars and there's spots where you'll miss them. Like, oh, where's it going? So I'm not doing very well. I don't think it has an end. I did play it for quite a while when I got, oh grief. That must, to be fair, that must actually be pushing the NES limit. The NES sprite limits, I think, there. So I got enough stars there, so I cleared that. There you go. I think that's the same background as last time, but they've just changed the colours. It's to say. Be interesting to see what the hardware in the cartridge is. Whether it's got any memory upgrades in the NES. As I say, my tutorials always add extra RAM, extra graphics RAM, just as a convenience to me, to allow me to program in basically the same way as I do on all the other systems. Because it's just like, when you write, there we go. I think you have to press up and fire to jump higher. When you're covering so many systems like I am, it starts to get very difficult. You can't even remember what processor I'm programming. I had to edit one of my videos the other day. I was recording a video for the Game Gear Master System, and I kept saying MSX, and it's like, well, I was doing the MSX video the day before, and also the hardware is actually kind of similar, and so it's like, well, that's my excuse anyway. So it's like I'm just getting so confused about what even system I'm doing now. It's starting to eat up more time, and whenever I start programming the NES the other day, the Z80, I was using 6502 commands because I'm forgetting which processor uses which command. It's JP on the Z80 and JMP on the 6502 and things like that. So I'm having to cut a few corners here and there just to allow me to work on so many systems without completely going nuts. But what I was saying before, and I totally got sidetracked, was the Jaguar. There's always this argument about whether the Jaguar is a 64-bit system, and I didn't realise before I read the documentation that its central processing unit is the 68000, the same one as the Genesis and the Neo Geo. And it's like a bit hard to see that as a 64-bit system. It's like this argument comes up as well with with the PC Engine. The PC Engine's a 6502 based one, and it's not like it's not a 16-bit CPU. It's a very fast 8-bit CPU, but its graphics are 16-bit. And it's like, well, does the PC Engine count as an 8-bit system or a 16-bit one? Does the Atari Lynx, the CPU is 8-bit, but the graphics are maybe even 32-bit. I'm thinking certainly 16. And the Jaguar, the CPU is 16-bit, but the graphics hardware is 64-bit. And that's why some of the games look so bad, because they haven't used the graphics hardware, because it's so hard to use and so poorly documented. So even just using the CPU and just basically using the graphics hardware to dump a bitmap to the screen, I couldn't even figure out how to do that from the documentation. It was so poor. And there's bugs in the hardware, which is always fun. Bugs in the hardware is always a nice thing to have when you're trying to program something. So as I say, those are the reasons why there is no Jaguar in the 68,000 tutorials. It would be nice to have it there, but I'd rather keep my sanity or what's left of it. So I say I'm having enough trouble getting my network to work on my live stream, so messing around with badly documented Jaguars, I'm afraid, is a bit outside of what I'm willing to try at the moment. But as I said before, I'm not planning on stopping making the tutorials if I've run out of everything else to do, and maybe covering the Jaguar will be the only thing that's left. So I'd love to do that. Neo Geo CD as well might be interesting. Neo Geo CD is very much like the Famicom disk system. The tile memory on the Neo Geo is ROM, so it can't change. So you can't decode a video to screen on the Neo Geo. If you have a video on screen, like Blazing Star does, you actually have to pre-render all the video frames as bitmaps and just show the bitmaps to the screen one after the other, so there's no compression. With the Neo Geo CD, you can. The memory that was ROM is now RAM, so you can actually decompress video or pre-render or real-time render video. Sorry, and there's a if you look online, there's a demo, it's a homebrew demo someone did where they were doing that kind of thing, doing effects that you would usually see on a computer on the Neo Geo, using that RAM to real-time change things. But the Neo Geo, the non-CD Neo Geo can't do it. So again, as I say, it's that's just something interesting about the limitations and the differences between the two. But I own a Neo Geo CD in the sense that it's in the cupboard and it's in the shrink wrap, and I've never opened it because I don't see the point in it. When I started programming the Neo Geo, I thought, well, I can get them for about $50, so I'll just buy one, because I'd got all the spare parts for one, because I found a broken one that was really, really cheap, and it had all the parts, including the power supply. So it's like, well, I can now buy one that's sold without a power supply for next to no money, and I did. But I never tested it because it's like, what's the point? If you're looking to buy one though, one thing that's worth bearing in mind is they can run CD copies. There's no copy protection, so you can run CDRs on them, although it apparently does reduce the life of the hardware. So just something to bear in mind if you're really desperate for a machine to run Metal Slug and you don't want to pay for Metal Slug, that's an option. But we're going to move to the Neo Geo one day on this kind of stream, because I've got an AES to MVS converter, so I can plug arcade cartridges into my home Neo Geo now. And I've now got all of the Metal Slugs, for example. You can buy them, not cheap, but you can still buy them at affordable prices, basically $100 to $300 for the MVS versions, whereas now Blazing Star I bought for about $300, something of that kind of territory. And if you buy that for the home version rather than the MVS arcade version, the home version is about $2,000 or even $3,000. It's a lot. So I bought the MVS versions of all the games that I wanted that I hadn't got for the home version, just because I was figuring, well, if the price goes up any more, I won't be able to afford them in any capacity. So then that's why I've started doing these videos, just for an excuse to play them, really. Because as I say, I'm always programming, always trying to research for more tutorials, because people like the tutorials and I like doing them, so that's what we do. Well, anyway, so I'm going to wait until I die next, and then I'm going to call it a day. Thanks for watching this long. I apologise for the signal problems earlier. It looks like I might be giving up on Wired altogether, which, as I say, is a very surreal thing. I mean, even the Wi-Fi is actually shared with my mobile phone, because my wife the mobile phone I'm using is plugged into Wi-Fi, and I'm streaming my own video just to check that the signal's working okay and things. But logically, that should be using up some of the bandwidth and some of the Wi-Fi signal. So you'd have thought, all around, you'd have thought wired would be far more reliable. But as I say, that's why Europe and what have you defined emission limits on electromagnetic signals, I guess, because these old machines don't meet them and churn out all kinds of garbage, and everyone's mobile phone and TV probably fails every time I turn my NES on, who knows. Oh, I made that one. Well. I was having trouble with my 4K signal as well before. I'm running this on a 4K monitor, so I've got USB-C to a HDMI splitter. It's got HDMI and VGA, and I'm only using the HDMI part, and I'm using it at 4K 30 Hz, which to be honest is all my PC can drive this monitor at. The monitor can do 60, but my PC can't do the signal well enough to do it, so I only run this at 30. And so I bought two USB-C to HDMI converters. The simple one I'm using now, and a better one which had USB hubs as well, USB ports as well, because I knew I was going to have USB limitation problems, although I was expecting it to be bandwidth, not distortion. But I couldn't use that other one because the signal was browning out like crazy all the time, and there was even colour flickering. The lines were going different colours on the screen, which is crazy. It's probably the only time you can justify buying those like $500 cables. But anyway, so I switched to the simpler one, and it still didn't work. But it does work as long as I turn my PC off. So as I say, I know all the monitors, all of my USB sound card, my cameras, my microphone, all of this stuff, I'm obviously pushing it to the limit. I get it, yeah, I know. But I was trying to make things as interesting as possible. I like having all the different cameras and all the lights and things just to try and give the show a bit of interest. But it is, and using the real hardware rather than the emulators. It's all to try and give the channel something a bit different. Don't want to just be having some naffy emulator doing everything. It's not really. There's no authenticity to it. And as I say, part of the reason I said I was going to finish things, didn't I? And part of the reason for doing this was because, as I say, got all this hardware sitting around, needs to be used, and if it still works, like the Famicom disk system doesn't. Anyway, I really appreciate you watching for so long. I've currently got 6 viewers here. Thanks a lot. I hope you found it interesting. If you have, please like and subscribe, because I'll be doing more going forwards. If you've not, then I guess hit the thumbs down and unsubscribe or whatever. If you've just caught this because you're watching gaming, then subscribe to the regular channel. Thanks, Jimmy. It's been really kind of you to stay around for so long, especially considering my connection problems earlier. I apologise for that, but as I say, it's a learning experience for me. Anyway, take care of yourselves. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.